Mom called my baby ugly at her birthday party. So I cut ties and erased her from every photo. Now she's crying on Facebook, playing the victim. My daughter Sarah's first birthday was meant to be soft and forgettable in all the best ways, like a warm breeze in June, or the fragrance of cake that lingers on your fingers long after the last mouthful has been eaten. It was a small gathering of family and neighbors in the backyard, with mismatched folding chairs pushed into the lawn, paper plates crumbling under store-bought cupcakes, and kids shrieking aimlessly. The kind of day you wouldn't write a sonnet about, but you would post a few grainy photos online with a message like, "Can't believe she's won already," and then move on. I had no intention of remembering it permanently, at least not in the sense that I do now. Sarah was dressed in a pale yellow romper with a stitched bumblebee on the breast, and one shoe went missing within the first 20 minutes. My husband Rick stood beside me, awkwardly holding her as we sang "Happy Birthday," too slowly, too loudly. My sister Donna cracked a joke about our tone-deaf family, and everyone laughed a little too loudly since that's what we do. We overcompensated. The air smelt of plastic forks, citronella candles and charred hamburgers. It should have been a great day. Then my mother arrived late, as usual, with a gift too enormous for the occasion, wrapped in shiny gold paper, as if we were celebrating a royal coronation, rather than a baby smearing icing into her own eye socket. Eleanor never knew how to read a room. All she knew was how to walk in and adjust the temperature. She kissed Sarah's head without looking at her, then turned to face me, smiling with her lips but not her eyes. "You look tired," she murmured, just loud enough for Donna to notice. "Still carrying that baby weight, huh?" I laughed quickly and instinctively, because I'd spent my entire life trying not to react when she cut. Rick tried to divert her attention by asking if she wanted a burger or something to drink, but she waved him away like a fly. She seemed overly focused on surveying the party, as if she were inspecting a battlefield. The incident occurred as we were attempting to convince Sarah to blow out her single candle. Everyone was crowded around the small table, phones out, and voices mingling with feigned eagerness. I leaned in close, smiling, and braced Sarah's small fingers as she reached for the flame. Then my mother leaned down, her lips almost next to my ear, and said, "She's going to grow up ugly, like you." I did not turn to look at her. I did not even blink. I literally froze there, mid-smile, one hand on my daughter's small wrist, the other gripping my phone as if it were about to burst. The candle flickered. Sarah produced a sneeze-like sound, and the flame went out. Everyone applauded. The moment has passed. But I did not. Later that night, after Sarah had fallen asleep and the last of the icing had been scraped from the terrace, I sat on the couch, browsing through images as if looking for something specific. I didn't know what. Not at first. Then I found it. It was fuzzy and overexposed. My face was slightly tilted, my mouth in that strange half-smile you get when you're going to laugh, but something feels off. My mother was in the corner of the shot, just visible behind my shoulder. Her face was near to mine, lips curved like a hook, and eyes focused. She resembled a different woman. Nobody else in the shot seems to notice her. They were all concentrating on Sarah. But I saw it. I saw her. I sat there staring at the photo for too long. Rick entered from the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. "Looking through the shots?" he inquired. "Yeah," I answered without moving. "That one's cute," he added, referring to a photo of Sarah with frosting on her hair. But I did not show him the second one. I did not say anything. I merely quietly saved it in a folder labeled "Evidence," all uppercase. The issue about mothers like mine is that they make you wonder whether your memories are your own or hers. She had a way of twisting things, so I wasn't sure if I was overreacting or simply underhealing. But this time, I had proof. I had a snapshot of the exact moment my brain said enough. That was the first picture I removed her from. I opened my editing app, the same one youngsters use to smooth their skin and whiten their teeth, and I started tiny. I cropped her out. I removed her shadow. Then I went on to group photography, specifically backyard images. The one where she is seated near the grill. The one where she's holding Sarah but not truly holding her. Arms stiff as if the infant was made of knives. Delete. Crop. Overcoat with paint. It became addictive, like cleansing a wound you were unaware was still bleeding. The following day, I printed 10 of my best photos and displayed them in Sarah's room. Every single one of them, beautiful, bright, cheerful, and devoid of Eleanor. Donna messaged me a few days later. "Hey, where's the picture of mom holding Sarah? The one from the cake didn't come out?" I replied, which was technically correct. That night, I had a dream about a family portrait, but whenever I tried to smile, my mother would lean in and mutter something, causing my face to crumble like wet paper. I awoke to a scorching determination in my chest. I was not going to let Sarah grow up hearing the same poison I had. I was not going to wait for the next party, photo, or whispered slur masquerading as truth. I wasn't going to let my mother write herself into my daughter's story the way she did mine, with a harsh tongue and a crooked smile. And if she didn't want to love Sarah properly, she would not love her at all. I took out my phone and began looking through every album, memory, and location my mother had ever touched in digital form. And I started erasing her, image by picture, word by word, memory by memory, because revenge doesn't always have to be overt. Sometimes it is just a quiet delete. That's just where I started. There is a distinction between forgetting someone and determining they do not deserve to be remembered. And I didn't truly comprehend it until I was standing in my laundry room, folding a pair of baby socks that didn't even match, and remembered how my mother used to call me thick around the middle when I was 12. Not with malice, at least not in the way most people could see, but with a tiny tilt of her voice, as if she was diagnosing a problem that she believed would only worsen. And she was not wrong. It did. Not my weight, but how I carried myself. By the age of 16 she had upgraded the insult. "Plain," she'd reply. Sometimes in passing, sometimes in the middle of a conversation, as if she was doing me a favor by saying it out loud before anybody else could. I recall brushing my hair the night before prom, holding the curling iron too long on one strand till it sizzled, and hearing her through the cracked door exclaim, "She's just forgettable. Maybe it's the eyes." As if I weren't right there. As if I weren't attempting to obliterate myself quicker than she could. At 22, I told her I wanted to relocate across the nation, start anew, and possibly go to graduate school. She did not flinch. She simply muttered, "You were probably a mistake anyway," as if she were reading it from a grocery list. I did not cry. I just nodded. Because what else can you do when someone tells you the truth like that? You either let it soak into your bones or spit it out before it sticks. I let it settle. For years. But now, I have Sarah. And something about becoming a mother makes you want to either shield your child from the world or expose her to it, piece by agonizing piece. I picked protection since I was aware of how sharp the initial cut could be. And I'd rather she was naive than quietly bleeding before she learned to speak. So I dug deeper than photos. I dug up the old flash drives, cloud backups, and printed albums buried in drawers I hadn't touched in years. Eleanor, my mother, was posing next to me at my wedding with a tight-lipped smirk, as if she were watching a slow-motion calamity. I opened the image in an editor and meticulously painted her out. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to remove decades of her standing too near to me, clutching me as if she were allergic to warmth. Gone. I glanced at the shot thereafter, the space she had occupied now filled with light and air. It seemed better without her. Then I moved on. To the Christmas of 3 years ago. She informed me that if I didn't cut back on the salt, Sarah would most likely be born cross-eyed. She said it with a giggle, fork halfway in her mouth. I nodded, too tired to fight. She was no longer in the background of the photograph, replaced by the glow of the tree and Donna's toddler throwing a plastic ornament at the cat. I erased her from a total of 24 images, which is unusual given that we only had 13 visitors at the party. But she managed to insert herself into every situation, as if she was certain that no moment went by without her involvement. Donna was the first to notice. She texted me 2 days after I published the revised album online. "Where's Mom in these pics? Did she leave early?" I composed and deleted my response 3 times before I got to, "She must have stepped out when those were taken." Technically this is not a lie, spiritually perhaps. Rick took notice next. He didn't say anything right immediately, but gave me the slow, deliberate look he saves for when he's deciding whether to hug me or propose therapy. Finally during supper he asked, "Are you sure this is the road you want to go down?" I gazed at Sarah, cheeks full of mashed peas, face plastered with love and innocence, and said, I'm already halfway there. What I did not mention was this. If I had a time machine, I would not go back and stop myself from doing this. I go back even further and eliminate Eleanor from every birthday, every dance recital, and every time I stood in front of a mirror and despised what I saw, because she had given me the means to express that hatred. Late that night, I was going through my phone in the dark when I noticed the message notification flash up. One line, no greetings. Why am I blocked from your daughter's baby album? I stared at it for so long that the screen darkened. I did not respond. I did not need to. She understood why. She simply didn't want to say it. And to be honest, part of me was waiting to see whether she'd send another message, call, or even show up again as if nothing had happened. Pretending that I was the dramatic one. Like I'd always misunderstood her. Like her comments were never daggers, but rather innocent small remarks. But she did not follow up. She did not push. Because she must have known, deep down in her cruel little chest, that I wasn't flinching this time. This time I was chopping. And this time, she was not returning. There is a type of vengeance that does not include broken glass or shouted voices, and does not result in bruises, shredded garments, or tire marks in a driveway. It comes on slowly, like poison in a cup of tea, something that tastes nearly good before making you sick. And when done correctly, no one can track it back to you. That's how I began dealing with my mother, as if she were a silent infection that I was finally addressing after years of pretending I wasn't sick. Yes, it started with the photographs. But it did not end there. Removing her face from images was simply the beginning. Underneath that surface, the rot permeated everything she touched. And I wasn't finished pulling it out yet. First I excluded her from the family calendar, which Rick and I used to keep track of birthdays, appointments, preschool visits, medical checkups, and holidays. I removed her email address from the invitation list. She deleted all of the events she had previously been invited to. She wiped away the repeated reminders of her presence. Then I altered the location of Sarah's daycare picnic, and only shared the new information to people I trusted not to share it. When Donna inquired as to why the address had changed, I explained that they were experiencing plumbing troubles. That was enough to please her. Nobody doubts logistics when it comes to infants. Everyone assumes that the mess belongs to someone else. Rick was watching me out of the corner of his eye, much like a man watches a lady who has started carrying a knife. I'm not sure whether she's defending herself or preparing something worse. One night, while Sarah was sleeping and I was lying on the couch retouching another old shot, he asked me, "Are you going to tell her?" I did not look up from my screen. Tell who what? He gave me the worn look I'd come to expect. The one that screamed, "Don't act dumb, Jenna." Not with me. So I closed my laptop and looked into his eyes. "Are you going to tell your mother why you're cutting her out of everything?" I did not respond right away. Because there was too much to say, and none of it came across the way I needed it to. So I simply shook my head. "She doesn't deserve closure," I finally stated. "She never gave me any." And that was the most honest sentence I had spoken aloud in months. I didn't receive any closure when she told me I was prettier before my teeth came in. I was 10 years old, standing in our hallway in a new pink dress, beaming because I finally had sleeves that weren't stretched out hand-me-downs. She glanced at me and said, "You used to be cute before those teeth." She treated me as if I were some wrecked adult she no longer wanted. I didn't find closure when she mocked me for crying at my own graduation, or told me that no man would ever marry someone so emotional. And I didn't receive any closure when she claimed Sarah would grow up to be ugly like me. So she wasn't receiving courteous phone calls. She wasn't receiving a formal announcement. She would figure it out in the same way the rest of the world does, via absence. Absence, however, carries its own weight. It fills the room like smoke. Slow and undetectable at first, then stifling when you realize you've been waiting too long to move. She must have felt it too, because less than a week after I kicked her out of the picnic, she showed up on my doorstep. It was late Thursday afternoon, the light was softening, and the fragrance of sun-warmed mulch rose from the flower beds I hadn't touched since spring. Sarah was playing with a bucket of toy blocks on the floor, humming to herself in that delightful nonsense language that toddlers use before words make sense. Then the doorbell rang. I recognized who it was before I opened it. Eleanor stood there clutching a gift bag that appeared to have come from an extravagant downtown boutique, complete with glittering handles and ribbons instead of wrapping paper. She wore her frozen half-smile, which she employed when she wanted to appear warm, but didn't have the energy for. And I will say this for her. She did not begin with a question, an apology, or even a joke. She simply said, "Thought I'd drop by." For Lily. I remained in the doorway and did not move aside. I wasn't going to make it simple. Inside, Sarah stopped humming. She looked up, then toward the door, then back down, as if something in her little head wasn't quite right. Eventually I let Eleanor in, more out of morbid curiosity than grace. She tried to approach Sarah carefully, crouched next to her, and holding out the bag like a wicked fairy godmother dispensing curses disguised as candy. But Sarah didn't approach her. She did not even smile. She glanced at Eleanor for a few long seconds before returning to her blocks and picking up the green one. As if the moment had passed. I saw my mother's face flicker in perplexity, the corners of her lips sagging just slightly, not enough for most people to notice, but I recognized every crease in her face, every breach in her armor. She waited for Sarah to get closer, for that innate infantile need to reach out to a familiar adult. But it never arrived. In that instant, something sharp and decisive clicked into place. Because even babies recognize when love is not genuine. I took the gift bag from her hands without saying anything, placed it on the table without peeking inside, and said the only thing that needed to be spoken. "I think it's time you left." She did not argue. She did not yell. She only nodded once and turned around, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she walked out of the house as if she had somewhere more important to do. However, she didn't. Not anymore. Because I wasn't going to burn down the house with her inside. I was only making sure she never got a key again. I always assumed that if anyone was going to support me, really step up and say, "Yeah, she did that. I saw it too. She said those things." It would be my sister. Donna was the one who experienced it beside me. Grew up in the same tight house, with the same oppressive restrictions and chilly silences that lasted longer than they should have. She was present when our mother called me dramatic for crying during Dad's burial, and then brought her into the kitchen to whisper, "Thank God it wasn't you, sweetheart. I couldn't handle that." She was there when Eleanor would criticize my appearance before turning to Donna, with a smile so warm you'd swear it came from someone else's mouth. We used to laugh about it in our 20s, laying on the floor of my flat with cheap wine and takeaway, calling her Jackal and Mom, when we were courageous enough to do so. But we never dug deeper. We never asked why Donna received the gold while I got the gravel. So when she eventually texted, "Can we talk?" I knew what was coming. The guilt. The perplexity. "Perhaps you're taking things a little too far." Even though I had prepared for it, I still felt a knot in my gut. The same one I used to get when I was a kid, and Eleanor called my name from another room, with that tone that made you question if you'd done anything wrong, even though you hadn't. Donna arrived with coffee in her hand and a tense expression on her face, as if she was trying not to frown, but couldn't quite achieve it. She didn't sit down straight away, instead hovering around the kitchen counter, as if she wasn't sure she wanted to remain long. I waited for her to speak first since I understood how things worked. She needed to feel in charge of the story. "You've been editing her out of everything," she finally said, her words cautious and slow, as if she hoped if she softened them enough, I wouldn't realize they were loaded with judgment. I nodded and leaned against the wall. "Yeah, I have." She hesitated and added, "Isn't that a bit much?" That was when I decided to show her the photograph. I kept it. Printed it. Despite my promise to myself that I was done with Eleanor. But this one was not for her. It was for proof. I gave it to Donna across the table. It was the identical picture from Sarah's birthday, with everyone else clapping and celebrating, and Eleanor leaning into my ear, her mouth contorted as if she were spitting out a bitter truth. "She said Sarah would grow up ugly," I told Donna directly. "Like me." Donna stared down at the photograph and remained silent for a long time. I saw her eyes skim the edges, the faces, and the frozen moment of me in mid-smile, my body stiffening. I waited for a denial. The deflection. "You must have misheard her." But it didn't arrive. Not right away. Instead, she spoke almost too quietly. "I thought you looked happy in this one." I shook my head slowly, exhausted. Do you really think I was? She didn't respond. That quiet broke something in her. Not totally, not enough to rebuild trust, but enough to consider the possibility that I wasn't making it up. That maybe all those years I was accused of being the sensitive one, the delicate one, the one with too much emotion and too little humor. Maybe I was simply the one telling the truth too soon for anyone to believe it. Then the bomb dropped. That night, Eleanor made a Facebook post. This is not a private message. This is not a telephone call. A public status that all her friends, neighbors, elderly churchwomen, past co-workers, and barely active high school acquaintances could see. It reads, "My daughter has poisoned my relationship with my granddaughter. Pray for me during this painful time. Some people don't know what family means until it's too late." It was shared 17 times inside the first hour. People began to leave comments, sending her hugs and prayers, as well as anecdotes about their own children growing cold or entitled and rude. Some of them even mentioned forgiveness. A woman wrote, "You're still her mother. Don't give up on her yet." I read it all in startled silence, sitting in my kitchen with the lights turned out and the light from my phone searing into my eyes. My hands shook with a mixture of wrath, embarrassment, and something I couldn't quite name. Perhaps grief, for the tiny part of me that still wished she'd someday say, "I was wrong, you didn't deserve that." But she never would. Instead, she went nuclear. I considered leaving the post unanswered, allowing her to sink in her own martyrdom as I remained silent. But then I realized that quiet was what had kept me shackled for so damn long. She felt most comfortable speaking in silence, saying nothing in response to nasty comments. When memory was uncomfortable, we pretended it did not exist, expecting me to take every insult like communion. So I broke the silence with a single comment. Only one. "You should pray for the woman in that photo," I commented on her page. "She doesn't exist anymore." By morning, there had been over 200 comments. Some of them supported her, some of them backed me. But the ones that struck the deepest were asking, what really happened? For once she did not have control over the tale. Something shifted in that place of uncertainty, in the vacuum of well-built lies. Because folks may not have needed to know everything. Perhaps it was enough that she was no longer the only one speaking. Following the final confrontation, there is an unusual silence. When the ranting stops, the social media dust settles, and the door you close behind someone no longer rattles. Not because they stopped pushing, but because they eventually gave up. That was the solitude I awoke to on Thursday morning. A cup of coffee in one hand. Sarah crawled over the living room carpeting in her footy pajamas, her mouth eating something invisible and her little fingers smacking against blocks that no longer lit up like they once did. The world seemed quieter. Not quite peaceful, but hollowed down in a way I'd never felt before. It was the kind of silence you get after gutting a house, and the floors still echoed from what once lived there. I'd been thinking about the baby book for months, ever since Eleanor showed up with that present bag and Sarah shied away, as if her body knew better than to let the poison in. Something clicked for me that day. Something essential and definitive. It wasn't simply about eliminating my mother from the present. It was about denying her access to the future, ensuring that her shadow never crossed the barrier of Sarah's recollection. Because youngsters remember more than we realize. They recall the tone of voices, the stiffness in their mother's jaw, and how hands clench when the phone rings. I remembered. I recalled everything. And I wasn't about to let Sarah inherit that history of harm. So I started writing it by hand, which felt more traditional and spiritual than typing. I made my own baby book, with pastel pages and gendered questions. Brown leather, thick paper, stitched binding. I composed the narrative of Sarah's birth, her fingers curled around my thumb, as if she knew who I was. It was the first time she laughed at the dog's tail. She preferred sweet potatoes over carrots. I wrote about Rick installing her cot in the middle of the night while muttering under his breath, and how we debated whether or not to play white noise while she was sleeping. But I did not write about Eleanor. Not once. Not just a footnote. Not as a background character. Not as a name scribbled beside guests or presents. She was a ghost. And ghosts do not belong in infant books. Each page represented a little insurrection. Each line of ink was a means of saying, "You don't get to live here anymore. Rick observed me working on it in silence. He didn't ask any questions. Did not make any ideas. One night, he came over, took the finished book from my hands, and delicately placed it on the shelf above Sarah's changing table, as if it were holy. And perhaps it was. The next morning, Sarah toddled over to that shelf, pointing with one chubby finger. She glanced at me, her eyes wide and eager, and spoke her first proper sentence. Not one word. A sentence. Nana gone. I did not cry. I did not flinch. I simply smiled, got down to her level, and said, "Yeah, baby. She is." It was not unkind. It was not even bitter. This was the truth. The simplest kind. The kind that doesn't require a story to back it up. Because Eleanor had not just departed from our lives. I had made sure she couldn't return. Like a whisper. As a twisted memory. As a ghost pretending to be family. I did not kill my mother. I simply removed the thought of her. For a while that was plenty. The quiet gathered around us like dust on a windowsill. Rick and I began sleeping better. Donna maintained her distance, unsure whether to embrace the silence or confront it. I didn't push her in any manner. Eleanor's absence provided me more breathing room, and I had no desire to fill it with past remorse or half-reconciled relationships. But 6 months later, a letter arrived. There's no return address. There was no postmark that I recognized. The envelope only had my name on it, written in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Not since Mother used to sign my permission slips with a long, irritated scroll. I considered burning it. I even held it over the sink for a bit, attempting to determine whether it was substantial enough to hold more than paper. But I did open it. There was a photograph inside. Me at 13. No makeup, bad braces. An oversized t-shirt and stringy hair put into a ponytail. I was smiling. Not a contrived smile, but a genuine, embarrassed, hopeful one. I had the impression that the person behind the camera adored me. On the back, she had scribbled only one line. "You were never ugly." I just didn't know how to love pretty things. No apologies. There's no explanation. Just one sentence. A confession laced with cowardice. The truth is too late to matter, and too early to forgive. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because I miss her. Not because I thought she had changed. But I wanted to remember the girl in the photo. I wanted to remember that despite everything, I still thought I was worth capturing. Worth seeing. I did not write back. I did not call. I did not post an answer. But I did not throw away the photograph either. I kept it. Not for her. For me. To recall what I survived. Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story. Dad said I didn't need help, because I was strong, but gave my brother $625,000 until he lost it. Now they're begging me to fix their mistakes. I was forgotten as an elder sibling since my parents put their trust in my younger brother. Please stay until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My name is Elio. I am 30 years old and manage my own technology startup. It's not a big corporation, but it allows me to live comfortably and possess what I need. I have 2 houses. One that I live in and one that I rent out. I'm not wealthy enough to spend recklessly, yet I make enough money to not be concerned. Now there is Henry, my younger brother. In our home, he has always been the center of attention. He's intelligent, has a way with words, and knows how to persuade others of his great ambitions. But he's not practical. Henry is constantly jumping from one huge idea to the next. One day it's a tech business, the next a fine restaurant, and finally a movie studio. His ambitions seem fantastic, but he never completes them. He always finds someone or something to blame, such as a lack of funds or a refusal to invest in his ideas. Then 1 year ago, I discovered something that surprised me. My parents had taken out a loan on their house to give Henry a large sum of money to start another business venture. That's when things started to fall apart. My parents are the type of folks that feel that families should always support one another, no matter what. They are not awful people, but they make one major mistake. They always believe Henry, no matter what. My father is serious and silent. He's always the one who makes decisions around the house. He's never really respected what I've built. Perhaps because I didn't follow the path he expected. To him, true success entails something large and flashy, not the modest software business I founded with my own efforts. My mother is gentler and more sensitive, yet she allows her emotions to guide her thoughts. To her, Henry is the one who still requires assistance. I'm the one who is already doing well and doesn't require assistance. She always encourages me. You're strong, you can manage on your own. But Henry needs his family. We don't have much money, but we've always been okay. My father owned a modest business, while my mother worked as an accountant. Their jobs provided us with a solid life. Furthermore, my grandfather left a large sum of money from wise property investments. If handled wisely, that money could have provided my parents with a lifetime of support. When I was little, I didn't believe they picked favorites. I assumed they loved both Henry and me equally. We had a shared birthday party. If I got a toy, he got one too. We both got new outfits during the holidays. Everything seemed equitable and fair. But when Henry started school, things began to change. Henry did really well. He received high marks and was liked by everyone. The teachers appreciated him. Other children liked him. My parents were so pleased with him that they eventually forgot I was there as well. It manifested itself not in toys or meals, but rather in larger events that shaped our futures. Henry wanted to learn French. They paid for pricey classes with no second thoughts. He wanted to go to a nice camp, and they said yes. He wanted to play the piano, so they bought one and paid for a private teacher. What about me? I never received that level of assistance. By high school, it was evident. Henry stated that he wanted to attend a prestigious private school. They paid the full price without thinking. I also requested to attend a better school, but my mother just stated, "Public schools are fine, son. There is no need to waste money." I was not clueless. I knew exactly what was going on. They believed that investing in Henry would yield significant returns in the future. They didn't bother because they assumed I was already fine and didn't require assistance. When I was 17, I discovered I enjoyed dealing with computers. I wanted to take an online course to learn how to create software. It didn't cost much, just a fraction of what my parents had previously paid for Henry's courses. But when I mentioned it, my father shook his head saying, "You can learn coding on your own. There's no need to spend money on it." I was used to doing things by myself, so I kept silent. I spent the entire summer researching free resources on the internet, learning every bit of code and process on my own. There are no professors or money from home. Only myself. After going through similar experiences several times, I finally understood what hurt. My parents never truly believed in me. To them, Henry was the one worth investing money and time on. I was just the child they assumed didn't need anything. I've never blamed Henry. It was not his fault. But from that day forward, I gave up hope that my parents would ever support me. After graduating from college, I worked for 2 years straight, saving every penny I could. By the time I was 25, I had saved enough money to start a small technology business. However, in order to expand, I required an additional $65,000 in funding. I considered my options carefully before deciding to seek assistance from my parents. I don't enjoy asking for things. I did not want free money. I was prepared to accept it like a loan, even signing a contract to repay it all. Still, I couldn't stop thinking, if Henry had been assisted so many times, why couldn't I ask only once? So I asked my parents for a large sum of money for the first time. I recall the day well. I sat in front of them and presented my company proposal in a serious and respectful manner. I had done my study, acquired competent business partners, and was completely prepared to be accountable for every single dollar. But only a few minutes in, my father stopped me and said, "No, it's too risky. It's too unsafe." I glanced at him, expecting he'd explain further, but he didn't. He wasn't interested in my ideas and didn't inquire about the effort I had put in. To him, whatever I did was a horrible decision. But when Henry tried something, it was a dream worth supporting. I did not argue. I gave a small, mournful grin and nodded. I wasn't surprised, yet I still felt disappointed. Even though I didn't get the $65,000, I didn't give up. I utilized my savings to establish the business anyway. It meant slower growth than I had intended. But I made prudent financial decisions and seized every opportunity to improve. It began as a small team of people working from home. I worked non-stop, sometimes until I was very exhausted. But I never quit. Nobody believed in me, but I trusted myself, and I finally succeeded. By 29, my company was doing nicely. I wasn't simply living a steady life. I'd also purchased 2 residences, one for myself and one to rent out. Both were in wonderful communities and made me feel more confident about the future. I performed all of this with no support from my parents or anyone else. I earned all I own. But I kept wondering how much money my parents had spent on Henry. When Henry was 23, he opened his own cafe, similar to those seen in Europe. My parents gave him more than $120,000 to aid him. He chose a prime location in the city center, outfitted it with elegant tables and chairs, and employed employees as if it were a premium restaurant. However, after just 8 months, the cafe closed. Henry had no understanding how to manage money, how to run a business, and most importantly, he never accepted responsibility for what went wrong. So, what did my parents say after the cafe failed? The economy is really hard right now. Our sweet boy deserves another try. Of course, another attempt. When he turned 25, he decided to try his hand at fashion. Another $65,000 vanished to build a small business selling unique clothing. This time, the store closed after only half a year. What's the reason? He knew nothing about clothing. But that did not deter him. Henry had always assumed that he was a genius that no one had discovered yet. I assumed that was the last time my folks helped him. But no, they kept trusting in him. That's when I finally realized the truth. My parents preferred me since I was not hazardous. They said no, because they never truly believed I merited their trust. Then, 1 year ago, I discovered something that rocked me to the core. I was in the historic section of town on a quick errand. On the way back, I planned to pay a visit to my parents. I didn't notify them I was coming. I figured I'd pop by briefly and say hello. But as soon as I came up to the house, something caught my eye. A brand new BMW parked in the driveway. I stared at it. My parents are not the kind to spend a lot of money, so where did this car come from? The front door opened, and my mother emerged with a big smile. She cheerfully exclaimed, "Henry just got a new car. Isn't it amazing?" I stood still, absolutely stunned. A BMW? With what money? Henry had failed repeatedly. He couldn't afford something so pricey. When I entered the house, I attempted to remain cool. But then I noticed a pile of bank paperwork on the table. I grabbed them up and started reading. My chest tightened. It was a mortgage loan for $625,000. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. The loan covered 80% of the home's value. My parents had placed their house on the line. But for what? Why do you borrow so much? I clutched the papers hard, attempting to keep my voice steady. You used the house to get a loan? I inquired calmly. My father frowned. My mother would not look at me. We only took out a small loan to help Henry, she explained calmly, as if it were nothing unusual. I gave a dry laugh. A small loan? I looked at the number again. $625,000. That was 80% of your home's value. That's small? What about the money Grandpa left? I asked him. My mother paused and exhaled slowly. That money? It's already gone, she explained. Gone? I repeated, repeating each letter as if it pained. I looked back at the BMW outside. I already knew the truth. You spent it on Henry's car, didn't you? They did not speak. My mother bit her lip. My father gave me a frigid look, as if I had said something disrespectful. He needed that car, my father remarked forcefully. In business, how people see you matters. Who would take you seriously if you show up in a normal car? I smiled. Not because anything was humorous, but because the scenario was so terribly ridiculous. You used up all the savings, spent the inheritance, purchased him a car, and now you've used your home to get a loan so he can have even more money for another plan. Do you even see how dangerous that is? If Henry messes up again, you'll have no place left to stay. Their faces transformed immediately. My mother looked at me angrily, and my father's voice grew rough and cold. You envy your brother, don't you? He asked. You want him to lose just so you can feel above him? I stood still. Envy? I repeated, unwilling to believe what I had heard. You seriously think I envy someone who has thrown away this family's money again and again and has never once taken any blame? They could not perceive the truth. I took a long breath and attempted to remain cool, but then I remembered something and went to my father. When I was 25, I asked you for a $65,000 loan to launch my company. Do you remember? I replied. You instantly said no. You called it too risky. And now you're fine with putting the house on the line for Henry? Has he ever succeeded? Even once? I'm really let down by both of you. My father slammed his drinking glass on the table with a loud thud. That happened years ago and you're doing fine now, he stated firmly. But Henry needs help. Stop bringing up the past to attack this family. He stood up hurriedly and gestured to the entryway. Leave. If all you're going to do is complain, then don't come back. I glanced at them for a few seconds. Then I put the loan documents on the table, nodded, and walked away. While driving home, I took up the phone and contacted Henry. Even though I was angry at our parents, I wanted to try to prevent him from making another major mistake. Henry, please listen. You're going the wrong way, I replied. Mom and Dad have risked everything for you. If you fail again, they're going to lose it all. Don't you see that? Instead of listening to me, Henry chuckled in a phony, mocking tone. You always do this, Elio. You're just jealous. You're scared I'll be more successful than you, and now you're trying to stop me. I went quiet. You really think that? I inquired calmly. What else could it be? He said with a scoff. You already have everything. A company, houses, money. And now that I finally have a shot, you can't take it. You're just being selfish. I didn't say anything for a few moments. Then I shook my head. If that's what you believe, there's nothing else I can say. I hung up the phone. This time, I completely gave up. A week passed without any contact. Then, out of nowhere, my parents called and invited me over for supper. I didn't expect that, especially so soon after our quarrel. Regardless of what had transpired, they were still my family, so I agreed to pay them a visit. When I arrived, I noticed Henry was already there. The atmosphere in the room was different, less tense than before. My parents glanced at me and my father spoke first. Elio, we're sorry. We said some things that weren't right last time. My mother nodded, her voice softer than normal. Henry also wants to apologize. I looked at Henry. He gave a slight nod and touched the back of his head. Yeah, I was kind of angry that day. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was shocked. My parents had never apologized to me before, and Henry had never admitted to being wrong. For a brief moment, I wondered whether they had finally understood. But less than 60 seconds later, I realized what this supper was actually about. My father coughed faintly, then began to talk slowly. Elio, you've got 2 properties. One is where you live, and the other one you lease. I could tell right away that something was awry. Why are you bringing this up? I inquired, my tone growing colder. My mother stepped in, her voice calm, as if she were saying something very natural. Henry is stepping into the real estate world. He needs to appear trustworthy. A good place to stay would help his image. If you could let him have one of your houses, it would be a big help for his future. I sat in disbelief. So that was it. The apologies had merely served to set up this ridiculous request. I responded immediately, looking directly at them. No. My mother blinked, as if she could not believe what I had just said. What do you mean, Elio? She inquired, remaining kind but sounding more apprehensive. I mean, I'm not giving Henry my property. I'm not foolish. The entire mood shifted instantaneously. My father lowered his chopsticks with a loud noise, his expression hardening. Elio, you have 2 places to stay. Henry only needs 1 break. He's your brother. I gave out a sour laugh. So what now? You expect me to give up my home just so he can look successful? How many times have you thrown money at him, even though he's never once achieved anything? My father's tone became stronger. He hasn't failed. He just hasn't gotten the right moment yet. And you already have it all. Can't you support him just this one time? I laughed again, but this time it sounded dry and hollow. Have everything? You never gave me anything at all. Even when I asked for $65,000 to build my company, you said no right away. And now you think I should give Henry a whole house? I'm not out of my mind. My mother's hand started shaking. My father slammed his hand against the table, making the water in the cups quiver. So you're just selfish like the rest. You envy your own brother. You're scared he might become more successful than you. Isn't that it? I rose up abruptly, my eyes full with disappointment. I'm just not dumb. Silence engulfed the room. I looked toward Henry. He still hadn't spoken, and his gaze was fixed on the ground. I knew deep down that if I'd agreed to give him that house, he'd take it immediately. He would not have thought twice. He didn't mind stealing what wasn't his. I shook my head, feeling ill rather than angry. You can keep putting your faith in him if you want. I don't. I walked out of my former home without saying anything else. My father's furious voice screamed behind me. If you leave now, don't ever come back. I did not stop. This time, I left them for good. As expected, Henry failed again a few months later. My parents did not mention it to me. Henry did not inform me either. I discovered it through someone I know who worked in real estate. Elio, did you hear? Henry's business went under. I paused, grasping my phone tightly. What went wrong? I inquired, despite knowing the answer inside. He picked the wrong deal. He bought when the price was high and sold when it dropped. Lost it all. That money from the mortgage your parents took? Gone. I closed my eyes and let out a breath. I wasn't astonished. It was going to happen sooner or later, but there was more. What about the BMW? I inquired, though I already had a horrible feeling. He sold it 2 months ago, my pal explained. He needed money to keep things going, but it didn't help for long. I let forth a flat, joyless laugh. My parents had gambled everything on Henry. They were certain he was intended to win. But now there's no money, no business, and no car. Soon, there will be no roof above their heads. What was my emotional state at the time? Not proud. Not joyful. The inside is just blank. I'd warned them. I'd attempted to make them see. But they ignored me. I already knew what would happen next. They'd reach out to me. My phone kept calling a few hours after I heard about Henry's firm failing, just as I expected. My mom made the initial call. I didn't respond. Then another, then dozens more. Messages came in non-stop. Elio, answer please. We need you. Please don't leave us alone. I saw each communication but did not respond. I understood exactly what they were asking for. I knew this would happen as soon as they applied for a loan on their home. They weren't messaging to apologize. They were looking for financial support. The following morning, I stepped outdoors to go to work. I paused abruptly. My parents and Henry stood in front of my door. They appeared worse than ever before. Henry had lost his normal pride. His face appeared thin and worn. No fancy clothing. There is no proud corporate mindset. He looked like he'd lost everything. My mother looked like she'd been crying for hours. My father, who was previously robust and proud, now appeared much older, as if stress had accelerated his aging. They had nothing left. My father cleared his throat and spoke with a hoarse, weak voice. Elio, we were wrong. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorway, my expression chilly. Now you get it. They did not argue. No yelling. Don't call me selfish or jealous. Because they needed me now. My mother began speaking, her voice weak. Son, we're out of options. Please help us. I sighed and stopped her. I don't have any cash. They froze, but my father responded instantly as if he had already practiced it. You could sell your company or one of your homes. If we can cover what we owe and keep the old house, we'll be able to begin again. I gave him a brief look. Then I laughed, not because it was hilarious but because I couldn't believe what I had heard. They truly assumed I'd sell the firm I founded to save them. These same folks had refused to lend me $65,000 when I wanted to pursue my passion. Now they wanted me to give up everything I'd built for them. They cut me out. They said no. And now they asked me to lose everything for them. I had nothing else to contribute. I stood tall, walked forward, and opened the door wide. I then pointed outside. Leave my home. Nobody moved. Henry opened his lips to speak, but I interrupted him. I told you, I'm not a fool. I had nothing more to say. 1 month later, the bank took over their old residence. They had to pack things and leave. They had lost their home and were now homeless. I was not surprised. I saw it coming the day they signed the loan. They started out staying with people they knew, But no one could keep them for long. They later moved into small, low-cost hotel rooms that were dark, wet, and overcrowded. When their money ran out, they ended up in shelters, waiting in line for meals. These were the same parents who formerly had a nice house and enough money to live comfortably. Now they were members of the group that had lost everything. And Henry, the man who once referred to himself as a businessman and drove a BMW, was suddenly broke. He walked around looking for work, but no one wanted to hire someone who had failed repeatedly. Even though I told myself I didn't care anymore, I observed them quietly from a distance. I did not contact them, but I knew how they were doing. Even though I tried not to feel anything, I couldn't completely turn away. For 3 months, I let them experience what it meant to lose everything. I wanted them to feel the consequences of their choices. But deep down, the sensation of being their kid prevented me from watching indefinitely. Even if they treated me harshly or shut me out, they were still my parents. About a month ago, I made up my decision. I would go visit them. They appeared absolutely defeated. My father, who formerly walked proudly, dropped his head when I entered. My mother seemed exhausted. Her eyes had shadows from sleepless nights, and her hair was grayer than I remembered. Henry sat off to the side. He was no longer full of confidence. He wasn't the type of man who boasted about his lofty goals and ambitious intentions. Nobody spoke for a while. Finally I spoke up. I will rent a small place for you. It'll be enough to live near the city, but only for 1 year. My mother lifted her head. Her expression conveyed a hint of hope. But I wasn't finished. During that year, Henry has to get work. And after those 12 months, you're on your own. I won't give more help. My father said nothing back. My mother didn't plead. They both understood they had no right to ask for anything else. Henry opened his mouth, perhaps to complain or to question, but for the first time, my father raised his hand and stopped him. He gave me a long look before slowly nodding. That was the first time I had seen him recognize his faults. You're probably asking why I just provided assistance for 1 year. Here's why. Henry still lives with them, and I won't let him rely on me. For years he's gotten used to having someone else handle his difficulties. But this time, if he wants a true life, he must earn it for himself. If my parents can care for themselves in a year, that's great. If they cannot, I will have Henry depart. After that, I will just pay rent to ensure that my parents do not end up on the street. But Henry will no longer be my job. That is my final decision. Now I'd like to ask you, if you were me, what would you have done? Would you continue to help them? Or would you let them deal with the consequences of their actions? Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. My siblings received luxurious gifts, but I received body wash for our birthdays. Now that I'm moving out, everything is coming apart. I am a 25-year-old woman living with my parents. I have 2 siblings, Joseph and Katrina. As the oldest, I was the first to begin employment. For a long period, just my father and I worked to support the family. My mother was either ill or too weary to work. Over the years, I've realized that her condition is self-inflicted. She would rather sit on the couch all day, watching TV and overeating than work. I gave up trying to convince her to start working a long time ago. My brother and sister began working shortly after finishing school. Unfortunately, they were unable to hold their jobs for long. My brother was a robber, and my sister blamed her lack of employment on her mental condition. The temporary financial comfort we felt when they started working did not endure. I eventually had to take on additional shifts at work, knowing I couldn't rely on them. I worked hard to move forward in my company. Now, I make more than most individuals my age. Many people compliment me on my accomplishments, yet I feel like an imposter when I look back. I have not done anything for myself. 70% of my earnings goes toward home expenses, leaving me with only 30%. That quantity barely meets my needs. On top of that, there is always an unforeseen expense at the end of the month that I must cover. I work so much that I rarely come home, and when I do, it's a nightmare. At least I get paid for my job, but no one pays me to clean the house. I need to clean, do laundry, wash dishes, and make sure we have adequate groceries. My mother and sister barely contribute. My mother spends the entire day watching television, whilst my sister locks herself in her room and only comes out to hang out with her friends or get into trouble. I can't ask my father or brother for aid because they adhere to traditional gender norms. This is the type of family I come from. Although I disagreed with those ideals, I felt I had no choice because I was living in their home. Every time I tried to speak up, my mother told me to find my own place. She understands that I cannot afford my own house while also supporting the family. She also considers my heart is too sensitive to leave them to fend for themselves, or so she believes. None of this is the reason I am writing this piece. It isn't even the reason I'm so frustrated. My frustration stems from the fact that my parents have once again demonstrated their preference for my brothers over me. It was my birthday 2 days ago. My gift? Body wash. Yes, body wash. You might think I am ungrateful, but Katrina celebrated her birthday last month. She had a lavish surprise party that we couldn't afford. I had to take on more consulting work to help pay for it. This came after my father said he had enough money to pay for the party after I initially declined. After the party, he approached me with a sob tale about miscalculating expenses. He also told me that he had borrowed from bad people and was frightened they would harm us. To protect my family, I chose to pay for the party. I was very disappointed because they constantly do this. Whether it's a holiday or a birthday, they always prioritize my siblings' gifts before my own. This year, my brother received a new gaming system as a gift, while my sister received a certificate for our city's most costly spa. And me, I received body wash. After everything I've done for this family, is body wash all I deserve? I'm not sure why, but this time I was rather offended. Every time they did this, I found a method to get around it. I persuaded myself they didn't mean it, that they adored and valued me. However, I believe it is time to quit telling myself lies. That body wash was the final straw. I exploded after receiving it. I was unable to restrain myself. I got a tremendous lump in my throat, and my wrath overtook me. I asked them why I couldn't throw a big celebration like Katrina and Joseph. All I got was body shampoo, not even a good cake. My father became enraged and asked why I was being so disrespectful when I understood their financial predicament. At that point, I began laughing and asked him how he could say it with a straight face. He was the one who went into debt to ensure Katrina had a spectacular birthday celebration, but he couldn't afford more than $20 for mine. I was tired of being treated differently. At that point, I had to inquire whether I was adopted. Is that why they treated me like a stranger? I work hard at my job, come home, and take care of everyone, but all I receive is body wash. They must be kidding. My mother started crying at that point, saying she hated it when I had these little outbursts. So it's all right for her to have emotions, but when I display mine, I'm disrespectful to the family? That is exactly what I interpreted from her comment. She has hundreds of various emotions during the day, and we are expected to tolerate them. But if I get outraged over something legitimate, I'm labeled theatrical. Fine. I decided to quit arguing and go to my room. When they tried calling, I pretended to be asleep. I sat there for the entire time, just thinking. I was really unhappy. Even though I keep myself busy all the time, I am unable to fall asleep. My thoughts center on how sad I am. Most people my age are buying their first car, getting married, or purchasing a home. I see some of them at work doing just that. Even though they earn less than me, I am envious. Despite being ahead in my job, I am far behind in life. I have no identity or purpose in this world. My only purpose is to serve these ungrateful people. Now that I think about it, how did I allow them to treat me this way? It had been going on for so long that I had no idea they were taking advantage of me. My thoughts on this have grown extremely apparent as a result of the event with my birthday gift. Now I understand I don't want things to stay this way forever. Something needs to change. I feel like I'm accomplishing nothing with my life, and I'd like to know what I can do to alter that, to have my own purpose. Update 1. I did it. I moved out 2 months after my original post. I can't believe I moved out only 2 months after the birthday incident. My apartment is small and sparsely furnished, but it is mine. Do you want to know the first thing I did after I finished moving? I lay in my bed for hours, with no one phoning me to repair any minor issue. It was an odd sensation. I had no idea that resting in bed could be so cathartic. You're undoubtedly wondering how I moved, especially given my controlling family. It was not easy, but I completed it. First, I took their counsel and began setting boundaries. I merely paid the bare minimum for household bills and saved the remainder. I also took on more shifts at work and saved the money. When my parents inquired about the money, I explained that it would be included in my year-end bonus. It was difficult, but as soon as I gathered enough for the deposit, I told them to go to hell and moved into my new apartment. Once I had picked which apartment to rent, I informed my parents that I was leaving. It wasn't a pleasant conversation. They were enraged and inquired whether living with them was indeed that horrible. I assured them it wasn't about them, but about me. I was getting older and needed to get more independence. I couldn't do it if I kept living with them. Besides, Mom had always said I should get my own apartment. Of course, my mother was offended by my reply and labeled it snarky. She claimed to want only the best for me, but I mocked everything she said. I realized I couldn't win that fight, so I apologized and went on. My family was very resistant to my desire to emigrate, but there was nothing they could do. I'd already signed my lease and was prepared to go. In protest, none of them helped me pack. I had to approach a couple coworkers for assistance. Janet and Lisa, two acquaintances from separate divisions at work, were the only ones who were aware of my predicament at home. When I told them I was relocating, they jumped for delight. When I requested for aid with the move, they were more than happy to help. We completed transferring everything a few days ago, and now I am in my practically empty apartment. I don't have much, yet I'm satisfied. I can't wait to start living independently. Update 2. I've been living in my apartment for more than a month. It's been a tough month, but I'm happier than ever, or was until a few hours ago. Let me quickly recap what transpired over the last month. I've been furnishing my flat and even had a housewarming party. Also, now that I have my evenings free, I've begun to get out with friends and even meet new individuals through them. It is wonderful to finally have a social life after so long without one. Honestly, I think I'm finally living for myself. Aside from developing a social life, I've started dating someone Lisa introduced me to. In the past, I never went out with anyone since I didn't have time. My family was continuously disrupting my plans with some sort of emergency. But now that I live farther away, they can't do that. You're probably wondering how my connection with my family has fared over the last month. Actually, none of them had messaged me at all throughout this time. They've been unusually quiet, which has been disconcerting at times. I considered messaging them, but I stopped myself. I feel like I'm usually the one to break the ice and apologize after our disagreements. I do not want to be that way anymore. I want to be treated with the same respect as any other member of the family. So I opted not to reach out. For a while, I felt our relationship had ended. That was until my mother contacted me this afternoon when I was at work. I was astonished to see her name on the screen, but I responded. As soon as I picked up, she asked, "Where's the check?" At first, I was perplexed because I had no idea what check she was referring to. Had she forgotten that I wasn't living with them anymore? What were her thoughts? Anyway, she wondered how I expected them to function without my assistance. I told her that she had two healthy, capable children who could help pay the expenses. They've had a month to look for work. What have they been doing during that time? She then questioned how I could be so inconsiderate to my siblings' plight. So I questioned her how I could feel sympathy for a criminal and a lazy girl. They damaged their own job possibilities. Couldn't they learn from me and persevere? I told my mother that I was not going to send anything and that they needed to make their own plans. Then I hung up. She contacted me numerous more times, but I did not respond. Later, my father called and tried to reprimand me, but I hung up. I couldn't believe what I had done. I had never cut someone off while they were speaking before. But, to be honest, the last month has been so tranquil, and reconnecting with them has reminded me of how tumultuous my life once was. I don't think I want to upset my peace by reintroducing them into my life. I wish they had remained silent. They should have cut me off and left me alone because, in reality, I was never actually a part of the family. Now I see that they only wanted me for as long as I could provide for them. I was living an unsustainable lifestyle because I was always there to support others. But now that's over. I have hit my limit. It is time for me to focus on myself. I should have done this long ago. They have attempted to make me feel bad, but it isn't working. I believe it's because I'm now immune to it. Update 3. Honestly, I'm not sure what's wrong with my family. I can't believe I am related to such strange individuals. I knew they were capable of going to extremes to achieve their goals, but this is too much. I'm not going to be patient with them after this. They're about to witness a side of me they didn't realize existed. It had been 2 days since my relatives began pestering me for money. I've repeatedly told them that I'm not giving them anything. They need to devise their own plan. If they can't pay their bills, how can they expect me to support them when I already have my own expenses? It's totally irresponsible and irrational. I've been ignoring them for the past 24 hours, concentrating on purchasing additional furnishings for my flat. It's finally beginning to look like a house, and I'm really pleased with myself. I can't believe I now have items to call my own. Unfortunately, I can't truly appreciate this success because they've been so obnoxious. I've ignored them the entire time, which is presumably why they decided to come to my residence. Yes, they came to my flat last night while I was hosting a little gathering. Here's what happened. Yesterday was a Friday night, and a few of my pals wanted to go out. But I was too exhausted. Lisa and Janet agreed, so we planned a book and wine night at my apartment. 2 more girls joined us, and we were having a terrific time, until there was a disturbance outside the door. I live in a quiet apartment community, so this was concerning. We attempted to ignore it, but it became louder and soon reached my door. When I opened it, my sister, father, and brother were arguing with the building manager. They demanded to be allowed into my apartment since they were family. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I informed the manager that I knew them, but they were not welcome. My father looked hurt and claimed he only wanted to talk. I asked him to look at the time, which was 10 p.m. I informed them that if they wanted to see me, they could have called ahead. Also, how did they know where I lived? That's when my sister stepped in, stating she learned from a friend who had seen me at the complex. Then she looked around and noted that I was living large. She asked why she couldn't live with me. I looked at her like she was insane. Why would I want to live with someone who is so lazy? I would have to feed her and clean up after her. I have not forgotten the dynamics of the previous few years. I told them to go because they were not welcome, particularly at that hour. My father refused, saying they wouldn't go unless I spoke with them. I informed him that I was not interested in talking, especially since I had guests. Then my brother began ranting at the top of his lungs, addressing my friends and calling me a useless sister. He then forced his way into my flat and started verbally assaulting me. Between him, my sister, and my father, I felt completely overwhelmed. Meanwhile, my friends sat stunned, watching this horrific show. Things only got worse. My father and brother began rifling through my belongings and turning them upside down. I cried because I saw them treat my possessions so disrespectfully. I implored them to stop, but they did not listen. They said I was to blame and demanded a check. That is, until security arrived. It turned out that Janet had gone to contact security as soon as my father and brother began disrupting the calm. When security arrived, my father and brother refused to go and attempted to resist. That was a major mistake since the uproar became so loud that they had to call the cops. My father and brother are currently in jail for trespassing in my flat and disrupting the peace. They will not be released until Monday, and I have already filed charges. I am bringing them to court over this. They've gone too far, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. This marks the end. They've gone too far, and I'm not going to let them drag me farther into their mess. Update 4. I wanted to post an update sooner because it has been 4 months, but I chose to wait until everything was resolved. Now that the trial has ended, I can finally tell you everything. I think many of you will be relieved to know that my family received what they deserved. Starting with my brother, the judge was harsh on him because he had previously shoplifted and is a repeat offender. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison. Unfortunately, this will remain on his record, making it even more difficult for him to establish a future for himself. But, honestly, given the way he's been spending his life, he had little chance. I'm hoping that his time in jail would straighten him out and help him set priorities. I've seen folks considerably younger than him who have significantly more structured lives. My father had to pay a fee to the court and is currently on probation. If he even receives a traffic ticket, he's done. He needs to be really cautious for a time. Otherwise, he'll wind himself in jail. Both the judge and the city take these transgressions very seriously, which is why they have met with severe punishments. Now, about my mother. Years of gluttony and idleness have now caught up with her. She is at high risk of heart disease due to her poor lifestyle. Because of how quickly her health is deteriorating, doctors estimate she has less than 2 years if she does not make radical adjustments. Knowing her, she probably doesn't care because she believes she will live forever. I tried for years to convince her to eat healthier, but she never listened, so I gave up. If her high cholesterol does not kill her, my sister most likely will. Speaking of my sister, she's been the talk of the town lately, and not for the right reasons. Since money has been tight and no one is funding her lifestyle longer, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She somehow became acquainted with the wrong crowd, girls who were rumored to be selling certain items on the street corner. It is both unlawful and highly harmful. I heard about a week ago that she had been detained for doing something questionable. I wouldn't be surprised if she ends herself in a physically perilous situation as a result of her chosen route. People have asked me to speak with her, but she chose this life. Honestly, she probably thinks I'm stupid for working an honest job. No insult to anyone in that business, but I've witnessed what some of these girls go through. There is no happy ending in sight for her, only substance misuse, additional jail term, and perilous situations. My mother has fallen multiple times as a result of the stress that Katrina has caused. But Katrina still lives with our parents, so they are enabling her conduct by allowing her to be there. Even though she is making money, she is definitely not spending it appropriately or paying her responsibilities. You are undoubtedly wondering how I know all this. I found out from a credible source. My parents are now receiving food stamps, and my father's working hours have been decreased. He spends most of his time at home, with my mother and Katrina. I can only imagine how hungry everyone must be in that house right now. But it isn't all for them. In addition, they must compensate for the damage they caused to my flat. I was able to recover the items they damaged, but they still need to pay the money the judge ordered. I feel sad for them, but not enough to intervene and help. It's what it is. They made their decisions, and now they must live with the consequences. Update 5. I have an update on several recent events, and the truth is that my family is falling deeper into the troubles that, as I frequently repeat, they made for themselves. They are the type of people who try to dig themselves out of a hole. I'm not sure if there is a way back for them, but I do know that it is not my obligation to get them out of the holes they've dug themselves. And they keep getting deeper. To begin with, my father, who was supposed to pay for the damage he and my brother committed in my apartment, just did not do it. Many of the comments I received in my last update predicted this outcome, and they were correct. The worst part is that this time he didn't even try. He made no effort to demonstrate his willingness to comply with the judge's instruction. However, the judge was correct when he cautioned that any failure would result in his return to prison. A sneeze may land him in jail, which is exactly what occurred. It wasn't a real sneeze, but the fact that he didn't pay what was ordered resulted in a trip to jail. I discovered a few days ago that he is currently serving time there. The irony of the situation is that my father was, in theory, the only one working in that house. I'm not sure how my mother will cope without him now that he's in prison. The last time I spoke with someone close to the family, they said there was almost no food in the house. Given my mother's health issues, this is really frightening. But, to be honest, all I feel is a frigid remoteness from the entire thing. For years, I was the one who kept that house afloat, and they emotionally and financially abused me. They are now paying the price for their own recklessness. On top of that, my mother is alone in the house, not only because my father is in jail, but also because my brother and sister are now behind bars. My brother had already been in jail for a while, as you may recall, but now my sister has joined him. Yes, her business venture ended just as expected. She was arrested. Everyone saw it coming, except her. Her condition worsened when she began using in addition to selling, leaving her even more vulnerable and without much judgment. An undercover detective caught her in the act, putting an end to her attempt to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle. Now she's awaiting trial, but I don't think she'll come out unscathed. The worst aspect is that she cannot afford professional counsel, therefore she is represented by a public defender. I do not mean to be unkind, but I do not see much hope for her. As for my mother, I honestly don't know what will happen to her life now. She is staying in the house that previously housed 5 people, but it is now completely empty. My father is in prison, my sister is awaiting trial, and my brother has already served time. The house is emptied, and the saddest thing is that she has no one to care for her. For years, she did nothing but rely on others to bring her money and food. She can scarcely leave the house anymore due to her health difficulties. I'm not sure how she'll survive. I know they get food stamps, but that isn't enough to survive on. In short, my family has entirely disintegrated. All I have left is my peace, and while it may sound harsh, I do not regret having removed myself. Update 6. I feel horrible for having to deliver bad news, but it's no longer my bad news, it's my family's. Despite the fact that everything is unfolding in slow motion, I can't help but feel relieved that I am not personally involved in this disaster. To begin, I have finally regained my money. It wasn't an easy process, and as expected, my father didn't have the money to pay me. The only reason Dad ultimately did was because my mother had to take out a loan to bail him out of jail. The fact that my father was in jail for contempt made matters even more problematic, but she eventually received the money after considerable work. Of course, it was not her own idea, but rather my mother's desperate desire to get my father out of jail. My father's release from jail is arguably the only bright aspect of this predicament. During this period, my mother had been living with a relative while attempting to resolve my father's legal issues. She left the house for an extended period of time, and as one might imagine, it was abandoned. Now, the neighborhood we lived in was never ideal, particularly for leaving a house unsecured. Apparently, it has been vandalized and completely looted. The most worrisome aspect is that according to what I've been informed, there are people living there now. People who, from what I understand, may be previous clients of my sister. The fact that people are squatting within the house is only the beginning of the problem. Still, if my parents are able to remove them, which I doubt will be easy, I'm not sure whether what remains is still a house. It bothers me to think about the state of the place I once called home, especially since I put so much time and effort into keeping it up when I was still living there. But at the end of the day, it is no longer my home. It's not in my name, and it's not my responsibility to solve it. My parents will have to face this on their own. My siblings continue to serve their sentences. There have been little updates on that front. What surprises me the most about all of this is how quickly the situation deteriorated after my departure. It's as if my departure was the final nail in the coffin of a scenario that was already decaying from within. My sister-in-law's DNA kit to ruin my marriage backfired when her son's test revealed shocking truths about her own family. I met my husband James, in our late 20s, and we soon fell in love. We married after 2 years of dating and have had a lovely and quiet life together ever since. We welcomed our gorgeous kid, Nathan, and felt like the ideal family. I felt nothing could separate us until Sarah, my sister-in-law, decided to poke her nose into our life. Sarah and I have never gotten along. From the minute James introduced me to her, it was evident that we were not going to get along. I'm not saying I didn't try, but Sarah made no effort to care. She accused me of wanting to overshadow her at her wedding because I was dressed in a cream-colored gown. To clarify, Sarah intentionally chose cream-colored outfits for all of her bridesmaids. However, on her special day, it became about me stealing her spotlight. From then on, it was a never-ending game of sarcastic remarks, backhanded compliments, and petty behavior. If I wore a new dress, Sarah would say, "It's cute, but I liked it better when I saw it in the store last year." If Nathan accomplished something, she'd minimize it by comparing him to her own son, Tommy. Despite this, James and I always attempted to ignore Sarah's petty behavior. We wanted Nathan and Tommy to grow up as close as siblings. Things, however, took a nasty turn this past Christmas when Sarah decided to create havoc in an unexpected way. For Christmas, she gave Nathan one of those popular DNA test kits. At first, I didn't think much about it. Nathan has always been interested in science and enjoyed knowing about his family history. Nonetheless, it was not a typical present for a child. That night, James approached me privately. He told me Sarah had made some weird, almost cryptic comments to him, such as "It's about time you got some answers," and "The truth always comes out." It didn't take long for me to put the pieces together. Nathan has green eyes, whereas James and I have brown ones. Of course, anyone with a basic understanding of genetics is aware that recessive features such as green eyes can pass down through generations. But Sarah had been making subtle, passive-aggressive statements for years, implying that James might not be Nathan's father. I was infuriated. Not only was she awful to us, but she was also involved with my son. We agreed to allow Nathan to take the test if he wanted to, knowing that the findings would confirm what we already knew. Nathan is our son, and the test would reveal nothing more. Nathan was enthusiastic about the science underlying the DNA test. He was excited to learn about his lineage and family roots, so we assisted him with the process, and he completed the test. Meanwhile, Sarah's son, Tommy, had been observing everything with great curiosity. Tommy, a curious 14-year-old, decided he wanted to take a DNA test too. Sarah's husband, Todd, thought it would make a good family activity, so they got a kit for him as well. What began as harmless curiosity quickly escalated into a family nightmare. Nathan received his results a few weeks later. Everything was as expected. James was clearly his father. But then we got the shock of our lives. When Tommy's results arrived, it was discovered that Todd was not his biological father. Sarah had an affair, and Tommy was not Todd's child. Todd was devastated. He had reared Tommy as his own, unaware that Sarah had been unfaithful. To make matters worse, Todd sought a paternity test for their younger daughter, who was just 7. The results confirmed his greatest fears. He wasn't her father either. Sarah's life was collapsing in front of her eyes, and it was not a quiet or private collapse. The entire family found out, and the consequences were harsh. Todd filed for divorce and left the house within a few days. The irony of the situation was hard to ignore. Sarah's attempt to undermine my marriage exposed her own lies. Tommy was the person who suffered the most. Nathan was also infected. He and Tommy had always been close, and seeing his cousin suffer through this upset him terribly. He began asking questions about why Tommy's father was no longer present, and it hurt my heart to hear how concerned he was for his cousin. Sarah's life deteriorated over time. Todd pressed for full custody of the children, seeking to limit Sarah's involvement in their lives. Sarah was a wreck at family gatherings, with a pale face and red eyes from crying. She appeared defeated. Sarah contacted me one day and requested assistance. She wanted me to talk to Todd and persuade him to lighten off on the custody agreement. She was trying to save what was left of her relationship with her children and turned to me for advice. At first, I was stunned. How could she have the arrogance to ask for my help after everything she had done to destroy my marriage and cause havoc at every opportunity? At first, I ignored her calls and refused to aid her. But as the days passed, I found myself wondering about Tommy. He was the real victim in all of this. Despite the fact that none of it was his fault, he bore the brunt of the pain. James, of course, warned me to keep out of it. He was confident Sarah had made her bed and would now have to lie in it. Part of me wondered whether I could help the youngsters involved find some serenity. It was not their fault that their mother made poor decisions. So I'm at a crossroads, confused about what to do. Should I help Sarah or let her suffer the repercussions of her actions? What would you do in my position? Update 1. I wanted to provide an update on what has occurred since my previous post, and I hope it puts some light on the complex situation we are dealing with. Sarah continues phoning me, and it's becoming exhausting. I expected her to cool down or back off soon, but she hasn't. She's relentless. On one especially horrible day, she called me 3 times in a row, leaving lengthy, sobbing voicemails. I could hear the despair in her voice, but I couldn't feel much pity. At one point, my husband James became so frustrated that he couldn't take it anymore. He called her himself. James rarely loses his temper, so when he called, I knew things had gotten out of hand. From across the room, I could hear his voice as he snapped, telling her he was tired of her insulting me and manipulating our family. After that chat, things became worse. Sarah's tone changed again. She began sending me multiple text messages, alternating between pleading for my assistance and accusing me of attempting to ruin her life. She was pleading for my help, telling me how much she wanted me to talk to Todd and repair things. The next thing I knew, she was calling me manipulative, alleging I was jealous of her and her family and intended to destroy her marriage. Throughout all, my main focus has been the children. They are innocent in all of this, but they are suffering the most. I can't quit thinking about Tommy and Nathan. Tommy's real father's identity must have been traumatic to him, and it's evident he's having difficulty processing it. It's difficult for me to see him suffer through this without being able to help. Nathan, on the other hand, isn't sure what's going on but feels something isn't right. We have explained it to him, but he is still too young to understand anything. We had a family gathering a few days ago, and Nathan wanted to play with Tommy like he did before. They used to be quite close, inseparable actually. However, when Tommy arrived, he was distant, quiet, and scarcely engaged with Nathan. Nathan wanted to play with him, but I had to make excuses, explaining that Tommy was weary. Meanwhile, Sarah continues to write me these long, theatrical notes. She messaged me yesterday, stating she felt betrayed by our family. I don't see how someone who was unfaithful might feel betrayed, yet she still appears unable to accept responsibility for her actions. It's always someone else's fault, mine, James's, Todd's, and never hers. James believes we should step in and assist Tommy, especially because he and Nathan are so close. However, he is also concerned about the ramifications of being too involved in Sarah's situation. We've been trying to strike a delicate balance between supporting the children and maintaining our personal tranquility, but it's been more difficult than we expected. Todd has begun to contact James, further complicating the situation. He's been trying to figure out what happened and wanted to chat about it. James reluctantly agreed to meet him for coffee. When he returned, he appeared more conflicted than ever. Todd is naturally devastated. He told James that he feels like his entire life has been a lie, and he is now trying to figure out how to co-parent with Sarah after everything that has occurred. Talking with Todd simply made James feel more torn. Todd is a kind man, who is only trying to do his best for his children, despite his awful situation. After hearing Todd's point of view, James feels even more divided about how to proceed. He wants to help, but we both know that getting too involved will drag us deeper into Sarah's chaos. It's difficult to determine what the appropriate decision is. Every time I see Tommy, I have an intense desire to help him. He's simply a child caught up in this mess, and he doesn't deserve it. Nathan continues asking why Tommy always appears so sad, and it kills my heart that I can't give him an honest reason. The more I think about it, the more divided I am between wanting to intervene and being terrified of being drawn into Sarah's tumultuous world. At the end of the day, all I want is to safeguard the kids. Tommy and Nathan deserve more, and it hurts to see them suffer as a result of their parents' sins. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm hoping we can find a way to resolve this without causing further harm. I'll keep you updated on what occurs, and once again, thank you for your ongoing support. Update 2. A lot has transpired in the last several days, so brace yourself. It's been a lot for all of us, and I'm not sure how much more I can take. First and foremost, Sarah chose to proceed with an official medical paternity test. She was dissatisfied with the results of the home DNA kit, arguing it was not a reputable source for making such a critical decision. To be fair, home tests have a margin of error, and I suppose she was hanging on to what little hope she had left. However, the results did not change. The medical paternity test verified the previous one's results. Todd is not Tommy's or his daughter's father. Sarah simply dug herself an even deeper hole. I was not surprised by the conclusion, but there was no space for uncertainty. Todd, in particular, appeared to be bracing himself for the worst, yet when the medical results arrived, I could tell he was still devastated. He appeared crushed, as if the last fiber of hope he'd been holding on to had been wrenched away. He had previously told James that he didn't expect any miracles, but there was always a small part of him that hoped the test was incorrect. Todd became more withdrawn after receiving the news. Todd apparently began researching after obtaining the results and tracked down the individual with whom Sarah was allegedly having an affair. Todd told James that this man was Sarah's coworker. He had suspected their relationship for a long time, but Sarah always dismissed it, claiming it was only work-related. Todd now understood everything. He remembered Sarah and this man being abnormally close, attending work parties together and messaging late into the night. She was continuously making explanations, assuring Todd that it was something innocent. But suddenly it seemed that all of our suspicions were being confirmed. Todd decided to face him. He traced him down to his residence and entered without alerting anyone. Todd, according to what I learned later, was not in a healthy mental state. He was upset, angry, and searching for answers. Things suddenly got out of control. The man initially disputed everything, but Todd refused to accept it. It quickly escalated into a shouting confrontation, and it wasn't long before it became physical. Neighbors heard the disturbance and phoned the cops. By the time authorities arrived, Todd and the man had been bruised. Todd was arrested for assault and now faces prosecution. It's a mess. James had to travel to the police station to assist Todd. He posted bond, but Todd is now facing major legal issues. He claims that the fight was provoked, but this will be difficult to prove in court. This whole thing is spiraling out of hand, and I can't help but believe it's all because of Sarah's decision to keep the truth hidden for so long. Todd is breaking down, and it's heartbreaking to witness someone who was always so collected break down like this. Meanwhile, Sarah is urgently trying to contain the damage, but it is far too late. Todd has petitioned for full custody of the children. Sarah is in a panic. She's trying to persuade everyone that Todd is the problem, referring to him as a psychopath and citing the fight as proof of his instability and danger. She's frightened Todd will take the kids away, and she's lashing out at everybody who doesn't support her. Todd has been talking of moving to another state with the kids to put some distance between them and Sarah. He believes the children deserve a fresh start away from the mayhem. But I am not sure. I appreciate his desire to protect kids, but separating them from everything they know could be more harmful than beneficial. Legally, it will be a difficult battle. When I last saw Sarah, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she kept saying that everything was coming apart, that everyone was attempting to take her children away. It seemed as if she were experiencing a panic attack. Even so, she continues to regard herself as the victim in all of this. At this point, I believe we have no choice but to become involved. We're already caught up in this mess, whether we like it or not. James believes we should back Todd and assist him with the legal issues he is experiencing, especially since Todd appears to be the more stable father in all of this, which I think is a great idea. I'll keep you posted as things go, but for the time being, we're simply holding on and hoping for a resolution that doesn't absolutely wreck these children's lives. Update 3. I have a lot to say regarding all that has transpired since my last post. First, let's discuss Todd and the man Sarah had an affair with. You already know how Todd was detained after the confrontation became physical. Initially, we believed Todd might face significant assault charges, but the man opted not to press charges. Todd told us that this man wants to disassociate himself from the entire affair. He undoubtedly realized that getting engaged may make matters worse for him, both personally and professionally. Although this individual admitted to the affair when the police arrived, he has since severed relations with both Todd and Sarah. In some ways, that chapter of the story has come to an end, which I believe is for the best. Todd does not need to continue battling with someone who clearly has no regard for the consequences of his actions. Many people have questioned me about Tommy's sister and why I haven't said more about her. She's like Nathan, she's been informed what's going on but doesn't completely comprehend it. Outwardly, she does not appear to be as impacted. Deep down, I believe she is mourning in her own way, but she has not voiced it as much as Tommy has. Tommy is older and more mature, so he understands what's going on, and it appears to be hitting him harder. That's why I've focused more on him, even though both children are plainly victims of their mother's behavior. James and I are here to support both of them, regardless of who their parents are. Tommy's situation has deteriorated significantly. Some students at his school have started bullying him, which has resulted in fights. It doesn't help that Sarah is flooding his mind with beliefs that everything is his father's fault. Tommy knows his mother cheated on Todd and that Todd is not his real father. Despite this, Sarah has told him she did it because Todd was mean to her. This demonstrates that she would sooner ruin and divide her family than fight for it. That is, in my opinion, an awful thing to say. Todd, thus far, has fought for his children. All he wants is to get away from Sarah, which anyone can understand given how manipulative, devious, and unfaithful she is. I don't understand how the person who caused so much pain and turmoil can portray herself as a victim while continuing to damage the lives of others. But I suppose it's in her nature. She did what she did because she is a horrible person who would continue to act this way to the end, hoping to gain something from it all to make herself feel better. This is yet another reason why James and I believe a child should not grow up with an unfaithful parent. It is the worst possible model and influence for proper upbringing. We hope Todd gets complete custody because if Tommy continues to be affected by his mother, things will not go well for him. His younger sister will suffer considerably more because she is still young and does not completely comprehend what is going on. Over time, Sarah is likely to manipulate her and turn her against Todd. There's also a potential she'll end up acting like Sarah, believing her actions weren't that horrible and blaming others. At this time, both James and I are completely on Todd's side, and the children's as well. First, Todd truly wants to be a good father to them, but we also believe that neither Sarah nor the original father is what the children need. Their best hope right now is with Todd, and we'll help all three of them in any way we can. Even the whole of James' family, including my in-laws, is on Todd's side. Sarah's parents are not pleased with what she has done. For example, the other day, we chose not to attend a family gathering. On the one hand, we had another commitment, but we also wanted to escape the turmoil surrounding Sarah, and it was hard to watch Nathan go through everything Tommy is going through. At the occasion, Sarah began with her customary monologue, attempting to portray Todd as the story's villain. But my father-in-law intervened and told her to stop because she was only inflicting more harm and sorrow to everyone. He pointed at Tommy, who was sitting across the room, and asked, "Don't you understand the consequences of your mistakes? Don't you see how you're still hurting everyone? Your children, and we, do not deserve this. Accept your mistakes and behave maturely." My mother-in-law then went on to say that she had not trained her to act this way and hoped her granddaughter would not follow in her footsteps. Sarah threatened to leave the event with the children, but no one in the family supported her decision. My father-in-law said she could leave if she wished, but the grandchildren would stay. He told her that both kids needed to stay away from the commotion she had started and was still causing around her, and that he would bring them back later. Sarah left, and the children stayed to play. Later, my father-in-law called Todd to invite him to spend the day with them, and he didn't hesitate. My father-in-law reported the kids seemed considerably better, but it wasn't a miracle cure. Still, being separated from their mother is the greatest thing for them right now because her poison is hurting them, something no one in the family wants, except, obviously, Sarah. Sarah doesn't appear to care about her children, only about how she is seen and not losing anything. A true mother would not use these games to harm her children. Instead, she would endeavor to protect them from everything. However, a mother would not have cheated on her spouse. Still, here we are. Update 4. With the newest developments involving my sister-in-law and her children, better times are on the horizon for this family. To begin, my sister-in-law discovered Todd had been invited to my in-laws' house after she had departed, and she was not pleased. She went to my in-laws' house and challenged them because she believes they should be on her side rather than Todd's. My in-laws stated that they would always side with the children in this case, and that if Todd was beneficial to them, they would support him. This, in some ways, fueled Sarah's rage. After shouting, she grabbed an item from the front garden and flung it at her parents' car window. To summarize, it's a distinct issue. My father-in-law sued her, and she had to pay for the window. I mention this because it is relevant to the custody case later on. Todd's divorce went fairly smoothly. There was ample evidence that Sarah had been unfaithful, therefore Todd came out top in the divorce. However, no one really wins in a divorce, especially one prompted by infidelity. At the very least, Sarah could not take any more from Todd than she already had. I wouldn't say it was easy to obtain full custody of the children. Quite the reverse. But I'll tell you what happened. Todd won. It wasn't simple because Todd is not the children's biological father. He did, however, succeed after months of judicial proceedings. Some family members, including James and my in-laws, testified to Sarah's character. The car window incident did not help her case, nor did the fact that the judge was willing to contemplate handing complete custody to the father rather than the mother, which is unusual. The final nail in the coffin was the biological father's actions. This father simply showed up for selfish reasons. To avoid paying Sarah's child support if she had custody of the children. Sarah no longer has custody, so she has no grounds to sue him because she has no child-related expenses. I'm not sure Todd can demand anything from his biological father, but he hasn't indicated to us he intends to. According to my understanding, the biological father formally gave up his parental rights, as if it were an adoption. I'd like to add that I haven't followed every aspect of the case, so this is only my basic idea. The crucial issue here is that Todd has custody of both children. This has already begun to have results, particularly for Tommy and his sister, who have started therapy. Sarah can see her children, but only with supervision. My in-laws, on the other hand, can see the kids anytime they want, as long as Todd makes the decision, and so can we. This has also benefited Nathan, who is now able to play with Tommy as previously. There is still much work to be done, but things are gradually returning to normal, which is all that matters. I'm not sure what to tell you about Sarah. I haven't had much communication with her in a while. I blocked her and haven't heard anything from her since. She sends sporadic messages to her parents and James, but their relationship is pretty icy right now, and I'm not sure if it will ever change. I was a shadow to my sister's piano career, exploited as my family's ATM. They even used my money for her secret engagement party. I, 35F, am a senior investment analyst for a major Manhattan firm, yet to my family, I am nothing more than a personal ATM. I've been hesitant to tell this tale, but recent developments have compelled me to seek outside viewpoints on a subject that has dominated my life for years. Growing up, our entire family revolved on my younger sister, 31F. She was a piano prodigy who began performing at the age of 4. My earliest memories are of helping Mom, 62 degrees Fahrenheit, and Dad, 65 degrees Fahrenheit, prepare for her recitals, ensuring that everything was just right for their little star. While other kids were learning to ride bikes or going on playdates, I was learning how to iron performance costumes and organize sheet music. Make sure your sister has everything she needs for practice, Mom would say, barely looking up from her phone as she recorded another video of my sister's performance. Don't forget to cook dinner. We'll be late tonight due to her master's class. By the age of 11, I was effectively controlling the home. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, it all fell on me. Because your sister needs to focus on her music, was the incessant refrain. I recall the day I won the state mathematics competition in 8th grade. I went home, clutching my award, only to find Mom furiously preparing for my sister's performance. "That's nice, honey," she commented distractedly. "But could you please assist your sister practice? She needs to perfect this piece for the Carnegie Hall Youth Showcase next month." The trophy wound up in a box in my closet, alongside other forgotten accomplishments. The tendency persisted throughout high school. While my sister traveled for competitions and master lessons, I stayed at home and maintained flawless marks. My parents paid thousands of dollars for my sister's private lessons, special music camps, and custom-made performance apparel. Meanwhile, I had to fight for essential school materials. "We need to be practical," Dad would say. "Your sister's career development requires all of our resources." I was not permitted to participate in any after-school events since someone needed to be present at home to prepare for my sister's nighttime practice sessions. When I indicated an interest in joining the debate team, Mom looked at me as if I had suggested we burn down the home. "How could you be so selfish?" she asked. "Your sister needs a peaceful, encouraging atmosphere to practice. You understand how crucial this is to her future." Every family gathering became a recital. Relatives would gather around the piano, gushing about my sister's skill as I served refreshments and cleaned up afterwards. "Such a helpful girl," they'd say patronizingly before turning back to compliment my sister. I learned to be invisible, moving softly through our house like a ghost, ensuring that everything ran properly while drawing no notice to myself. My parents only truly noticed me when anything went wrong with my sister's routine. Then I became visible, but just as a target for blame. If she had a poor performance, it was because I had not provided a calm setting for her practicing. If she felt fatigued during a competition, it was because I hadn't properly prepared her meals. During my senior year of high school, I was admitted into several top universities on partial scholarships. When I showed my parents the acceptance letters, their reaction was lukewarm, at best. "We can't help with any expenses," Dad stated firmly during supper. "Your sister's career development needs all our resources. Besides, you're good with household management," Maybe you should look into becoming a housekeeper." That's when our neighbors, the Wilsons, intervened. They had seen me grow up and how I helped at their little accounting office after school while waiting for my sister's practices to finish. Mrs. Wilson, 55 degrees Fahrenheit at the time, had always regarded me as a second daughter, taking an interest in my accomplishments and promoting my academic endeavors. They promised to help with my education fees by establishing up a work-study program at their company. My parents didn't complain. They appeared happy to have me taken care of, so they could concentrate only on my sister. When I attempted to talk about my college plans, Mom cut me off. "We trust the Wilsons to handle it," she added, immediately returning to her phone and organizing my sister's next appearances. "Just make sure this doesn't interfere with your responsibilities at home." The Wilsons became my lifeline. Their encouragement extended beyond financial aid. They demonstrated what it meant to be respected for my own qualities and accomplishments. Mrs. Wilson attended my college orientation when my parents were unable to come due to my sister's summer music festival. Mr. Wilson, 57 million at the time, educated me on financial management and sparked my interest in investment research. Looking back, I understand the Wilsons saw something my parents didn't. A young woman with promise beyond being someone's support network. They supported my education not because they had to, but because they believed in me. Their advice helped me get internships, which led to my current career as a senior investment analyst. Throughout college, I had little touch with my family, only traveling home for important holidays. Each visit followed the same pattern. My sister conducting court in the living room while I assisted in the kitchen, listening to relatives praise her most recent accomplishments. My own accomplishments, Dean's List accolades, internships at famous firms, job offers, were largely overlooked. Everything changed 10 years ago, at what was supposed to be my sister's breakthrough moment. She was preparing for the prestigious Chicago International Piano Competition, which my parents were confident would propel her career to new heights. They'd spent months working out every element, from her performance pieces to her stage demeanor. Even her food was methodically planned to keep her in top-performing condition. The injury occurred during an especially intensive practice session. She was working on Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, a notoriously difficult piece that she persisted on performing despite her teacher's objections. I was at work when Mom called me, her voice quivering with hysteria. "Get to Northwestern Memorial ASAP. Your sister, her wrist, you must come right soon." I discovered them in the ER. Mom screaming violently, Dad pacing like a caged animal, and my sister pale and mute, cradling her right wrist. The diagnosis was devastating. Significant tendon injury with potential nerve involvement. The doctor's words sounded like hammers in the sterile hospital room. Significant rehabilitation is required. Prognosis is unknown. Professional performance might no longer be possible. The next few months were a blur of specialists, second opinions, and increasingly frantic attempts at treatment. My parents liquidated everything they could, including Dad's prized vintage Mustang collection, Mom's family antiques, and even their retirement savings. They flew in European specialists, attempted experimental treatments, and sought advice from alternative medicine practitioners, anything that gave them hope. I watched their finances vanish as they sought miraculous treatments. When their financial advisor suggested bankruptcy protection, they looked at him as if he had suggested abandoning their child. "Money is just money," Dad said. "Our daughter's talent is priceless." I saw he said daughter, as he normally does. Reality set in gradually, like a slow-moving storm. Despite multiple treatments, my sister's wrist never recovered the strength and flexibility required for professional performance. The physicians eventually verified our fears. Her career as a concert pianist was ended. It was more than simply the loss of a profession. It was the dissolution of our entire family mythos. My parents became older in just a few months. Mom stopped fixing her hair and cosmetics, and spent days in her bathrobe viewing footage of my sister's previous performances. Dad, who had always been the family's rock, began missing appointments, bills, and even food. Sometimes they appeared lost, as if their identities were inextricably linked to my sister's musical career. That's when their focus moved to me. But not in the way I had secretly wanted for all those years. They regarded me not as their daughter who could help them recover, but as a financial answer to their escalating issues. I had recently gotten a huge promotion at my firm, becoming a senior analyst before the age of 30, an accomplishment that would have gone unnoticed if it hadn't come with a substantial income rise. "You're doing so well," Mom said on one of her first calls to me in months. Her prideful tone was swiftly followed by, "Your sister needs help with her medical bills. Since you're in such a good position now?" The request was wrapped in layers of remorse and obligation, given with the skillful manipulation that only a mother can perform. At first, I agreed to make a modest monthly donation of $1,000 to help with my sister's therapy and living expenses. It appeared sensible, even necessary. They were family, after all, and I was finally able to give back. The thankfulness looked sincere at first. Mom phoned me on a regular basis to check on my sister's progress, while Dad wrote awkward but emotional thank you emails. But the requests kept coming, each one bigger than the last, with increasingly convoluted excuses. My sister wanted a new automobile because public transportation made her anxious following the incident. My sister's recuperation was hampered by negative energy in the house, which required repair. They required a family vacation because emotional healing is just as important as physical therapy. Then came the credit cards. Just for emergencies, they said, and I was added as an authorized user to their accounts. Their concept of an emergency was surprisingly fluid. Shopping became retail therapy, costly restaurants were necessary for maintaining family bonds during a crisis, and luxury spa retreats were considered essential for recovery. Monthly expenses rose like ivy on a wall, gradually at first, then abruptly overpowering. $1,000 became $2,000, and finally $3,000. Each increment was followed by detailed explanations and emotional manipulation. "After everything we've done for you," became their regular refrain, though I couldn't recall exactly what they'd done. When I hesitated over a particularly substantial request, Mom reminded me of all the sacrifices they'd made, conveniently forgetting that those sacrifices were solely for my sister. My buddy Rachel, 35F, whom I've known since college, was watching the situation with growing concern. "They're not treating you like family," she explained during our weekly dinner at her parents' restaurant. "They're treating you like an ATM with legs." I dismissed her concerns at first, making excuses about family commitments and filial duty. But her comments stayed with me like burrs. The Wilsons, my long-standing mentors, were also concerned. Mrs. Wilson took me aside after our monthly lunch meeting. "Honey," she began, her face wrinkled with concern. "This is not support, it is exploitation. We didn't help you advance your job so you could become your family's personal banker." The breaking point came last week, when I realized they had spent more than $122,000 on my sister's therapeutic shopping spree, without telling me. The expenses included designer clothes, spa treatments, and a weekend at a luxury resort, all explained as necessary for her emotional recovery. When I tried to talk about setting boundaries, Mom fell into tears and gave an Oscar-worthy act about how I was abandoning the family in our time of need. Later that night, Dad called. His voice was gruff and disapproving, using the same authoritarian tone that had kept me in line throughout my youth. "Your sister requires our assistance more than ever," he admonished. "How can you be so selfish when she's still trying to find her way? We've raised you better than this." The irony of his words, "we raised you," hit me like a physical blow. Did they raise me, or did I raise myself under the influence of their obsession with my sister? Yesterday, I received another credit card statement for $115,000 for a health retreat that I never approved. When I called to inquire, my sister answered the phone. "You make so much money," she added dismissively, with the same arrogant tone I remembered from childhood. "Stop being stingy. You know Mom and Dad need this to deal with everything they've been through because of me." I'm writing from my office on the 47th level of our Manhattan building, surrounded by the trappings of my success, despite, rather than because of, my family's support. The chart on my second monitor depicts my family's financial abuse in cold, hard statistics. Over the last year, they've spent more than $150,000 of my money, which is more than most families' annual income. My financial consultant is concerned about the implications for my long-term financial security. My therapist gently indicates that it is important to set hard boundaries. Rachel alternates between providing her guest room and volunteering to tell my family where they can go, in many languages, thanks to her worldwide business experience. But every time I consider cutting them off, I remember the little girl who simply wanted her parents to appreciate her accomplishments. The adolescent who believed that if she worked hard enough, someone would eventually recognize her as more than a support system. The young woman who still hopes that her family would see her as more than a resource. I'm currently at a crossroads, confronting decisions I never intended to make. The Wilsons, who have been more like parents to me than my own, advise I should protect myself. Rachel provides practical assistance and a secure place to ponder. My therapist discusses boundaries and self-respect, words that appear easy but bear the weight of decades of familial relationships. I'm having trouble with questions that don't seem to have any correct answers. Am I being ruthless by considering financial constraints? Is it immoral to want appreciation for my own achievements? Should I simply accept that this is my job in the family, the dependable one, the responsible one, the human ATM? I really don't know anymore. Update 1. My world imploded yesterday when I found on Instagram that my parents are presently in Hawaii, not for a vacation, but for my sister's secret engagement party, which they paid for with my credit card. During lunch, I was aimlessly scrolling through my feed when I came across a post from a mutual acquaintance that stopped me cold. Paradise with the future wife, what's Josh, engagement bliss to Hawaii. There she was, beaming on a beautiful beach, standing next to her boyfriend, now fiancé, with our parents and his family in the background. They had been there for 3 days. I went 3 days without hearing a word from you. Confused and hurt, I opened my banking app. The charges struck me like fists. First-class flights to Honolulu cost $24,800. Grand WEA Resort, 3 ocean view suites for $21,600. Additional expenses include a welcome meal, spa treatments, a sailing excursion, and a private beachside dinner for $12,000. My hands shook as I dialed Mom's number. When she responded, I could hear Hawaiian music and laughter in the background. "Oh honey," she explained casually, "your father and I just decided to take a short break. You're aware of how tough things have been lately? A short break at the Grand WEA with my sister's fiancé's complete family. That kind of break cost more than $58,000 on my credit card." Silence. Muffled voices. Then my sister got on the phone, her remarks oozing with entitlement. "Listen, Miss Executive," she snarled. "You are not required here. You are no longer family, but rather a walking ATM. Nobody wants to hear about your valuable career as we celebrate my engagement." I urged myself to be calm. "That ATM just paid nearly $60,000 for your little party." She laughed coldly. "That's what you're good at, isn't it? Keep doing your fancy job, and we'll enjoy spending your money. It's the only thing you're helpful for." Always was. The call went dead. Within minutes, they had blocked me on all platforms. Mom sent a final message that read, "We're all tired of your negative attitude and jealousy. Please leave us alone. You've spoiled enough precious moments for your sister." Something cold and hard solidified in my chest. My hands remained steady when I accessed my banking app. Each click felt like it broke another link in the chain that had connected me to their torture. Click. Hotel reservations are canceled. Click. Spa packages and excursions are canceled. Click. Return flight tickets have been canceled. Click. Mom's card is permanently deactivated. The aftermath was immediate. My phone burst with calls and messages. "Mom. It's an emergency. Call immediately. Dad says. Fix this quickly. You are embarrassing the family. Sister. You better get this right. Number. Hawaii. The future in-laws, without a doubt." As the hours passed, their tone changed. Mom said, "Sweetie, please, we can talk." Father. "We'll pay you back." Sister. "Stop being so petty, it is my engagement." Then my sister sent out a social media blast. "I can't believe my own sister would spoil the best time of my life. She has always been envious, but this is a new low." Toxic family. Heartbroken. I'd been quiet long enough. I shared everything, screenshots, credit card statements, and messages. The truth about their hidden celebration, unapproved charges, and nasty statements. The tide shifted immediately. People rallied in support as they realized the truth behind their carefully prepared narrative. Mutual friends informed me of the consequences of my acts. My parents needed to borrow money merely to purchase economy flights home. They had to check out of the Grand WEA in front of other visitors. My sister had a temper tantrum in the lobby, which ended up on TikTok. The actual explosion occurred when the fiancé's family discovered they had been caught up in my family's web of deception. They'd been promised a fully compensated luxury holiday, only to find out they were part of a plot to exploit the rich sister. The engagement itself is being called into question, with the fiancé's family questioning the entire arrangement. I am writing this update from my friend Rachel's guest room. The Wilsons have shown their support, reminding me that true family does not treat you like an ATM. I have locked all of my accounts, and my lawyer is drafting cease and desist letters. What is the most difficult part? I don't feel anything. There is no guilt. There's no sadness. Just relief. It's as if I've finally laid down a burden I've been carrying my entire life. Perhaps that is what freedom feels like. Update 2. My Hawaii post has had an illuminating impact. What began as a family quarrel has revealed years of deception to a much larger audience than planned. 3 days after my previous post, I received an email from my sister's fiancé's mother. We met in a quiet cafe in Manhattan. We had no idea, she said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup. Your parents informed us that they were wealthy financial managers, and that your sister was taking a sabbatical from her concert piano career. They stated that this luxury vacation was a gift to both families. She revealed specifics concerning my family's dishonesty. They portrayed themselves as wealthy sophisticates, telling anecdotes about their great occupations and my sister's temporary hiatus from performing. The realization struck their family hard. James is devastated, she continued. Not for the money, but for the lies. He confronted my sister about using my credit cards without authorization. She chuckled and stated, "She's my sister, her money is family money." That evening, James ended their engagement. "I can't build a life with someone who thinks it's okay to steal from and exclude their own sister," he told her. He returned the ring and walked away, his family fully supporting his decision. My sister's reaction was explosive. She recorded a lengthy Instagram live tirade blaming me for losing her chance at happiness, and when that failed to get traction, she began contacting my colleagues, spreading stories about how I abandoned my family during their time of need. However, her efforts backfired. My documented post had already made the rounds. People had seen the credit card statements, read the texts, and recognized the pattern of exploitation. Each fresh attack from her simply strengthened my narrative. My parents' professional consequences has been devastating. Dad's consulting customers began to distance themselves, Mom's social position in her charity circles plummeted, and their carefully cultivated image was broken. They've been trying to reach me via every imaginable method, and the tone of their messages alternates between appealing and demanding. "We are still your parents. You can't just cut us off after all we've done for you. Your sister is devastated. How can you be so cruel? We'll pay you back, just give us time." They showed up at my workplace yesterday. Security turned them away, but not before Mom made a fuss in the lobby, wailing about her ungrateful daughter. My colleagues have been quite sympathetic, with several sharing their own experiences with family financial abuse. The Wilsons have been my rock throughout this. Mrs. Wilson helped me update all of my banking information and set up additional security measures, and Mr. Wilson is aiding me in documenting every unlawful transaction for possible legal action. Rachel's parents offered me their guest house for as long as I needed it. Family doesn't steal from family, Rachel's mom told me. And they certainly don't exclude their own daughter from family celebrations while spending her money. My sister's ex-fiancé's family has been surprisingly supportive, openly defending my actions and sharing their own experiences with my family's dishonesty. Their narrative has helped others understand the full extent of the manipulation. My parents sent me a big envelope today containing a promissory note for the Hawaii expenses, as well as a letter about healing our family bonds and moving forward together. They advised family therapy and regular meals to help re-establish trust. However, there was no acknowledgement of their decades of emotional abuse, or of how they'd methodically abused me while removing me from the family. The letter spoke of misunderstandings, as if $58,000 in illegal charges and a secret family celebration were simple mistakes. I returned the letter unopened, accompanied with a formal cease and desist notification from my lawyer. Some extended family members have attempted to mediate. "They're still your parents," they explain. "Family is family. But here's the thing, they've never treated me like family. I was their housekeeper, their ATM, their backup plan, never their daughter, sister, or true part of the family. I'm tired of being the family bank, the unseen support system, and sacrificing my financial and emotional security for people who see me as nothing more than a resource to be used. For the first time in my life, I am putting myself first. My money is my money, my time is my time, and my life is my life, which is extremely freeing." Update 3. It's been a month since my previous update, and I finally accomplished something I never imagined possible. Full tranquility. 2 weeks ago, my family made their final attempt at reconciliation, arriving to my apartment with photo albums and recital programs. The doorman refused to let them in, but they waited in the lobby for hours. "We just want a reminder of the good times," Mom told the doorman, flipping through images of my sister's performances and pointing out shots where I might be seen in the background, usually hauling equipment or adjusting costumes. Dad attempted to contact my colleagues via LinkedIn. "We're worried about our daughter's mental health," he wrote. "She's cutting off her loving family over a simple misunderstanding about shared finances." My co-workers shared his mails to me, along with comments justifying my behavior. My sister's current social media technique has been to play the victim, creating videos about toxic individualism and how money destroys families, while carefully editing out the unauthorized charges and the secret engagement party. However, the comment sections are brimming with folks who have shared the entire narrative. The final straw came when they contacted the Wilsons to make me see reason. Mr. Wilson responded quickly and emphatically. You've exploited her for years. Leave her alone. I've changed my phone number, shut down my accounts, and even pondered moving to another city. My therapist thinks I'm finally recovering my life, and for the first time in years, I feel liberated. They phoned the Wilsons to help me see reason. Mr. Wilson's response was perfect. For 30 years, I've seen you treat her as nothing more than a convenience. She is finally appreciating herself as she should have been regarded all along. My lawyer has written formal letters requesting payback of all improper transactions, which totaled over $287,000 over 3 years. They claim everything was agreed upon and that I'm rewriting history. The bank's fraud department disagrees, and investigations are still ongoing. I've moved to a new apartment in a secure building, my mail has been routed through a screening agency, my phone number has changed, my email has rigorous filters, and my social media profiles have been cancelled or made private. Last week, I was offered a partnership track position, and the managing partner commented that my management of the family problem demonstrated the kind of backbone they look for in a leader. Without the continual drain of family expectations, I've been able to focus on my profession. Rachel's parents have informally adopted me. I have standing Sunday dinner invitations, and her mother keeps accidentally cooking too much food. They urge that I attend their annual Cape Cod vacation. Real family vacations don't involve stealing, Rachel's father quipped as we organized the trip. Mrs. Wilson has been helping me rediscover abandoned interests, and I've started taking photography classes, which I couldn't do in high school because it would have clashed with my sister's practice schedule. The Wilsons are still my steady mentors. The extended family is still pushing for reconciliation. But what about the holidays? What happens when your parents are older? These queries used to make me feel guilty. Now they just remind me of how one-sided our relationship was. My therapist pointed out that my family's behavior follows a common pattern of financial abuse, which is veiled by cultural expectations of familial obligation. You're not breaking family bonds, I was told. You're breaking free from exploitation. The most significant shift has occurred internally. The worry that used to follow every phone contact, email, and bank alert has vanished. I no longer flinch when my phone calls or feel terrible about spending my own money on myself. Last weekend, I bought an abstract painting that spoke to me, and as I hung it, I realized it was the first time I had bought something solely for myself, rather than for someone else. My sister's most recent post accuses me of being callous for abandoning family. Nevertheless, I have not abandoned family. Rather, I have discovered my true family. It's Rachel's parents asking about my day, and they mean it. It's the Wilsons honoring my accomplishments without expecting anything in return. My coworkers are the ones who never hesitate to defend me. Sometimes I think of that little girl who ironed concert dresses and made dinners to get attention, and I wish I could tell her she deserved more. That being useful is not synonymous with being loved. The real family does not treat you like an ATM. I'm not an ATM. I'm not a support system. I am not a resource to be used. I am free. I grew up overshadowed by the golden child. She tried to seduce my husband, we exposed her, and my mother framed me, refusing her faults. Hello, everyone, I need some help and maybe a place to rant. This will be a long one, so please bear with me. I, 33F, have always had a problematic connection with my younger sister, Julia, 30F. Julia is our family's golden child, which has caused me grief since we were little. Growing up, our parents always preferred Julia. She was the beautiful, talented, and all-around perfect person. Meanwhile, I was the older sister who consistently fell short of their expectations. My earliest memories include occasions when I felt invisible next to her. One memory strikes out so vividly. I was about 8 years old and it was my birthday. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, fantasizing about the cake, the gifts, and the attention. But as soon as Julia entered the room, everyone's attention went to her. She was just 5 at the time, but she had a talent for stealing the show. She began singing a song she had learned in kindergarten, and everyone applauded, completely forgetting that it was my special day. My parents didn't notice the tears welling up in my eyes as I watched them adore her. This was a pattern that continued throughout our childhood. Julia received the greatest clothes, the most attention, and all of the compliments. I recall feeling pleased of myself after receiving a B on a math test. However, when I presented it to my parents, they only glanced at it before asking Julia about her day. She had colored a picture at school, and that was considered more impressive. The hardest aspect was that Julia was well aware of her position within the family. She wasn't a malevolent child, but she knew how to use circumstances to her advantage. If we ever fought, as siblings do, She would scream and run to our parents, who would always support her side. I was always the one that got scolded, regardless of the situation. The dynamics remained rather stable as we grew older. Julia excelled in whatever she did. She was a straight A student, a star athlete, and eventually a social butterfly with a large network of friends. In contrast, I suffered both intellectually and socially. I was shy, introverted, and had difficulty establishing friends. Our parents frequently compared us, always adversely to me. "Why can't you be more like Julia?" was a constant refrain in our home. High school was really stressful. Julia was a freshman when I was a senior, and she rapidly gained popularity. She joined the cheerleading squad, was chosen class president, and boys wanted to date her. I was the nerdy senior who rarely had any friends and spent the most of his time in the library. She seemed to be the center of my existence. One incident from high school still bothers me. There was a major dance coming up, and I had finally worked up the guts to ask a boy I liked to go with me. To my astonishment and happiness, he replied yes. But a week before the dance, he canceled, claiming he had invited someone else. Someone else turned out to be Julia. She had no idea I had asked him, but it didn't matter. She got to go to the dance with him, whilst I stayed at home, devastated and alone. After high school, I attended a local community college, while Julia received a scholarship to a prominent university. Our parents were understandably pleased of her, but it hurt to see how little they cared about my accomplishments. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my tuition, but Julia's expenses were covered by our parents. They paid her many visits, attended her college functions, and were continuously positive about her progress. Meanwhile, I had to fend for myself, both emotionally and financially. I eventually earned a nursing degree, while Julia went to law school. By then, I had learnt not to seek my parents' approval. I moved out, obtained a job, and attempted to establish a life for myself. But the agony of those early years never left me. Julia and I remained in touch, but our connection was strained. She was always the successful, attractive sister, but I was just myself. Fast forward a few years, I met a beautiful man named Alex and we married. For the first time in my life, I felt truly appreciated and cherished. Alex was aware of my family dynamics and was really helpful. He helped me realize my own worth beyond the shadows cast by my parents and sister. We purchased a home, and I began to feel like I could finally leave the past behind. But Julia returned to my life in an unexpected way. She had completed law school and was working for a respected firm. She became engaged to a man who seemed perfect in every aspect. Our parents were ecstatic and couldn't stop talking about the forthcoming wedding. I tried to be pleased for her, but old feelings of inadequacy and hatred came back. Julia asked me to be her maid of honor. I was taken aback. We weren't friends, and I questioned why she would want me in such an important capacity, but she insisted on rebuilding our connection. I reluctantly consented, believing that this would be an opportunity to repair old hurts. The wedding preparations were a nightmare. Julia was a bridezilla, demanding and domineering. Every choice had to go via her, and she frequently rejected my thoughts and proposals. It was evident that she had not changed much. She still desired to be the center of attention. But I gritted my teeth and went along with it, hoping to support her and even gain some of her favor. Next came the bridal shower. It was a spectacular event hosted by our parents and attended by Julia's numerous friends and colleagues. I felt out of place and uncomfortable, but I kept a brave face. During the event, our mother delivered a speech praising Julia to the skies. She stated how proud they were of her accomplishments and how attractive she appeared. I stood there, feeling invisible yet again. But then something unexpected occurred. Julia seized the microphone and began speaking. She thanked everyone for attending, then turned to face me. Her response was, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge my sister, who has always been there for me. I know I haven't always shown it, but I appreciate everything she's done. She's strong, kind, and an amazing person. I'm lucky to have her as my sister." I was stunned. Julia has never publicly recognized me like this before. Tears welled up in my eyes, and for a little minute, I believed our relationship could alter. Perhaps this was a tipping point. However, the goodwill was short-lived. Julia called me in a panic about a week before her wedding. She had misplaced the family heirloom necklace that our grandmother had given us, and she was scheduled to wear it on her wedding day. She was hysterical, and I dashed over to assist her in finding it. We flipped her place upside down and still couldn't find it. 2 days later, Julia called me again, accusing me of stealing the necklace. She claimed I must have taken it out of jealousy. I was astonished and hurt. All I had done was attempt to help her, and now she was accusing me of stealing. Of course, our parents believed her, as they usually did with Julia. I was devastated. Eventually, Julia discovered the necklace in a drawer she had forgotten about, but the damage had already occurred. She never apologized for accusing me, and neither did our parents. The wedding went on, but I felt like an outsider in my own family. After the wedding catastrophe, Alex and I chose to concentrate on our respective lives and families. Alex, who had always been technologically inclined, began researching ways to make money online. Initially, it was a side venture, but he quickly discovered a great formula and began earning thousands of dollars. Within a year, his web projects were bringing in tens of thousands, and our financial situation had much improved. With our newly acquired fortune, we purchased a stunning mansion in a famous area. Alex surprised me with a Bugatti as a symbol of our success, and we soon had 2 beautiful children. Life was great, or so it appeared. However, my parents remained unconcerned about our accomplishments. Despite Julia's recent marital issues, they paid her periodic visits and were more engaged in her life. Julia had been living on her own since her marriage ended and was struggling with her work. She had been laid off from a top legal firm and was struggling to make ends meet. Her jealousy grew worse when she saw our success. She came over one day, claiming to want to reconnect and spend time with her nieces and nephew. Initially, I believed her. I assumed she was sincerely attempting to restore our shattered relationship. However, it did not take long to learn her genuine objectives. She started dropping up unannounced, often when Alex was home alone. She would dress provocatively and make subtle, flirty comments to him. Alex, being the faithful spouse he is, quickly informed me of her behavior. We were both stunned and outraged by her conduct. Rather than address her immediately, we devised a strategy to reveal her true colors. We installed hidden cameras in the living room and other public locations to catch her in the act. It wasn't long until we obtained the evidence we required. Julia made her move one day while I was supposed to be out running errands. She approached Alex, placed her hand on his arm, and whispered provocative things into his ear. "Come on, Alex," she said. "You deserve someone who truly appreciates you. Someone like me." Alex played along just long enough to keep her talking. "Julia, you need to stop. I love my wife, and this is incredibly inappropriate." But Julia persisted, leaning closer. "She doesn't have to know. It'll be our little secret." That was the moment we'd been waiting for. Alex forcibly pushed her away, saying, "Julia, I'm serious. You need to leave. This is wrong on so many levels." We documented the entire event on camera. With the proof in hand, we decided to take action. First, we convened a family meeting, which included Julia's husband, who had been unaware of her activities. When everyone had gathered, we showed the video. The room was silent as the video aired. Julia's husband's face became red with rage, and my parents were completely astonished. The video concluded with a tense silence before Julia's husband stood up. "Julia, how could you? After everything, you try to seduce your own sister's husband?" His voice was full of surprise and hurt. Julia stammered, attempting to come up with an excuse, but there was no disputing what we had witnessed. Our parents looked at her, disappointed and disgusted. "Julia, we trusted you. We always believed you were the better daughter, but this is beyond forgiveness," my mother replied, her voice cracking. My dad shook his head. "You've brought shame to our family. I don't even know who you are anymore." Julia's husband promptly filed for divorce. He left that same day, accompanied by their 2 children. My parents, who had always elevated Julia to a pedestal, were forced to confront the truth of her behavior. They moved away from her, unable to look at her in the same manner again. Julia's world came crashing down. She has lost her husband, her children, and the support of our parents. She tried to reach out to me, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive her that readily. The scars were too fresh, and the treachery was too severe. Alex and I continued to construct our lives together, stronger than ever. Julia's betrayal, however terrible, had eventually brought us together. We knew we could handle anything as long as we had each other. Life went on, but the scars from the past remained. My parents, who had always preferred Julia, struggled to accept her conduct. They visited less frequently, and when they did, it was evident that they were still dealing with their disappointment. They attempted to appear normal, but the strain was evident. Julia, on the other hand, was attempting to gather up the pieces of her broken existence. She had lost her work and was struggling financially. Her attempts to reconnect with her husband had been unsuccessful, and he had filed for full custody of their children. She was alone and desperate. One day, she appeared at our door, looking more ragged and broken than I had ever seen her. She pleaded with me to let her in so she could explain. Despite my better judgment, I agreed. She sat at our kitchen table, tears flowing down her cheeks, admitting everything. "I'm so sorry," she wailed. "I've been jealous of you for so long. I saw how happy you were, how successful, and I couldn't stand it. I thought if I could take Alex away, I'd feel better. But I was wrong. I've lost everything." Her words struck me hard. For so long, I had regarded Julia as the favored one, the one who had everything. I never realized how deep her insecurities went. I felt sympathy and hatred, but mostly I was tired. Tired of the drama, the suffering, and the never-ending cycle of rivalry and animosity. "I don't know what to say, Julia," I said. "You've hurt me in ways I can't even begin to describe. But I can't keep living with this anger. It's poisoning me, and it's poisoning our family." Julia nodded, tears still running down her cheeks. "I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just wanted you to know how sorry I am." We sat quietly for a while, the weight of our common history hanging thick in the air. Julia eventually went, leaving me to my own thoughts. Could I ever really forgive her? Could we ever get past this? In the weeks that followed, I concentrated on my family and my personal recovery. Alex was a rock for me every step of the process. We discussed Julia, the past, and what the future might hold. I slowly began to let go of some of my anger and bitterness. I recognized that holding on to it was not benefiting anyone, least of all myself. Julia continued to struggle, but she started to make changes. She began going to therapy, getting a job, and rebuilding her relationship with her kids. It wasn't easy, and there were failures along the road, but she was making an effort, which was something. My parents remained distant. The golden child had fallen, and they had no idea how to deal with it. They continued to see Julia on occasion, but it was evident that nothing would ever be the same. They came to see us less and less, and when they did, the tension was evident. It seemed as if they didn't know how to interact to me without the usual dynamic of favoritism. One sunny afternoon, as I watched my children play in our lovely garden, I realized something profound. Despite everything, I was content. I had a nice husband, wonderful children, and a life I was pleased with. Julia's acts had been painful, but they had also brought me to a place of strength and resilience. In the end, life continued. The scars of the past would never be completely healed, but they did not have to define the future. Julia and I started to restore our connection gradually and cautiously. It wasn't perfect and never will be, but it was a start. For the time being, I've decided to focus on the now and the future. The past had its purpose, but it no longer kept me captive. Alex and I continued to create a life together full of love, laughter, and the occasional struggle. Our beautiful home exceeded all of our expectations. The mansion was huge, beautiful, and ideal for raising a family. The children enjoyed their new rooms and the wide backyard where they could play. Alex and I were happier than ever, and for a while, it appeared that we had put the turmoil behind. Part 3. An unexpected turn. Life seems to have settled into a peaceful rhythm. Julia and I worked hard on our relationship, and it gradually began to improve. She apologized sincerely, and I noticed a true improvement in her behavior. We began meeting for coffee, discussing our lives, and even planned family outings together. It was a relief to finally feel like I had a sister I could count on. Meanwhile, Alex's career soared. He accepted an early retirement option from his software employer, which came with a large compensation. We were now financially secure beyond our wildest expectations, and Alex was excited to spend more time with the family and work on personal projects. However, the peace we had worked so hard for was quickly broken. My mother, who had always preferred Julia, appeared reluctant to accept the changes in our family dynamic. She couldn't get the suspicion that I had set Julia up with the video evidence. The thought persisted in her head, and she became increasingly aloof and hostile. One morning, while I was preparing breakfast, the cops appeared at our door with a search warrant. They discovered other items in our garage that I had never seen before, including pieces from a stolen car that had been reported missing months before. I was stunned as they handcuffed me and hauled me into custody. I kept thinking that it was a terrible mistake. Alex, who was on a business trip, rushed home as soon as he received the news. He quickly engaged one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the country, Rachel Hargrove, a talented but pricey barrister. Rachel assured us that she would get to the bottom of things and clear my name. The court date arrived soon. Rachel worked tirelessly in the days leading up to the trial, going over every detail and questioning everybody who may provide information. During our investigations, we discovered the awful truth. My own mother had planned the entire plot. Apparently, my mother had underworld friends who helped her obtain the stolen car parts. She had planted them in our garage, attempting to tarnish my reputation and, in her warped manner, teach me a lesson: for what she saw as my betrayal of Julia. She refused to recognize that her golden child was at fault, instead believing that I was the manipulator. The trial was tough. The prosecution presented their case, convinced that they had sufficient evidence to convict me. But Rachel was prepared. She provided irrefutable evidence that the car parts had been installed in our garage without our knowledge. She also called a witness, one of my mother's accomplices, who claimed that my mother had coordinated the entire operation. It barely took the jury 2 hours to deliberate. They judged me not guilty of all accusations. I was free, but the ordeal had left a lasting scar. My mother, however, was not so fortunate. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in jail for fraud and conspiracy. The judge made it clear that her conduct were both illegal and morally abhorrent. The courtroom became hushed as the verdict was read. My mother's expression was one of shock and rage. She never expected her scheme would fail so spectacularly. As they dragged her away, she gave me a hateful look. It was a sad moment, but I knew justice had been done. Following the trial, our family was left to pick up the pieces. Julia was horrified by our mother's behavior and suffered from emotions of guilt and humiliation. She relied on me for support, and for the first time, I felt like the elder sister, the protector. Alex and I took some time to recover from our tragedy. We spent more time with our children, making positive memories and ensuring they felt safe and loved. Our bond grew deeper, and we recognized that no matter what obstacles we faced, we'd always have each other. Julia, determined to atone for our mother's sins, worked tirelessly to reconstruct her life. She acquired a new job and began dating again. She stayed close to us, enjoying the family support she had previously taken for granted. My father struggled to accept my mother's infidelity. He had always been more passive, matching her powerful demeanor. But this occurrence shocked him to the core. He paid her a visit in prison, but their connection remained difficult and distant. Life ultimately discovered a new normal. Our family gatherings were tiny, but they were full of true love and connection. We honestly discussed the past, our faults, and the lessons we'd learned. It wasn't flawless, but it was authentic, which was enough. Through it all, Alex was my rock. His constant encouragement and affection kept me going, even on the worst days. His early retirement allowed Dad to spend more time with us, and he launched a new business that matched his technical knowledge with his desire to serve others. We shifted our focus to the future, instilling new traditions and ensuring our children grew up in a loving and supportive atmosphere. The past would continue to be a part of our tale, but it no longer defined us. 5 years had gone since the traumatic circumstances that led to my mother's imprisonment. Throughout those years, our lives gradually returned to a state of normalcy. Alex and I continued to prosper, our children grew up happy and loved, and Julia became a vital part of our family, having entirely repaired our previously shattered connection. Despite the anguish of the past, we were able to construct a tranquil and pleasant existence. Our family gatherings, while smaller, were filled with laughter and genuine connection. We frequently reminisced on the past, appreciating the lessons learned and the strength we found in one another. However, the serenity we had established was shattered once more when my mother was freed from prison. She had served her sentence, but her bitterness and animosity had not subsided. She was a different woman now, elderly and virtually blind, but her hatred for me had grown even deeper. Unbeknownst to us, my mother was scheming her retribution. She believed I had destroyed her life and wanted to hold me accountable. One fateful day, she took a shotgun from a nearby farm and started out to get me. Her objective was to catch me off surprise and take my life. I had no notion how dangerous the situation was. It was a bright afternoon, and I had taken the kids to the park. Alex was out running errands, while Julia was at work. I was sitting on a bench, watching my children play, when I suddenly felt a searing pain. I turned to see my mother standing a few feet away, her shotgun pointed directly at me. Her expression was a mix of wrath and determination. She screamed something incoherent and fired several bullets in rapid succession. Despite her fading eyesight and weak hands, 2 rounds reached their target. One impacted me in the buttocks, while the other damaged my right leg. The pain was intense, and I collapsed to the floor, unable to move. Bystanders phoned the police after they heard gunfire. When my mother saw the commotion and realized her plan had failed, she attempted to run but was swiftly captured by authorities. She was detained and eventually charged with attempted murder, which resulted in a 10-year prison sentence. I was brought to the hospital and had surgery to remove the bullets and fix the damage. The doctors told Alex and Julia that I would recover completely, but the physical and emotional scars would take a long time to heal. Throughout my 3-week hospital stay, Alex never left my side. He was my rock, offering constant support and strength. Julia came every day, bringing me my favorite delicacies and lifting my spirits with her stories and laughs. Their devotion and dedication were the pillars that helped me get through the hardest times. During those long, peaceful hours in the hospital, I had plenty of time to think about all that had transpired. My mother's actions left me feeling shocked and betrayed, which was significant. I couldn't comprehend how she let her anger for me consume her to the point that she attempted to kill me. Despite the anguish and bewilderment, there was a strong sense of appreciation. I was alive, and I had a loving family who supported me through thick and thin. Writing this piece is my way of absorbing what has transpired. It's a chance for me to express my gratitude to everyone who has helped me along the path, who has offered encouraging words when I needed them the most. Your support has meant everything to me. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tight during my mother's trial. The prosecution provided information about her crime, and the evidence against her was overwhelming. My mother sat there, a shell of her former self, but the rage and bitterness in her eyes were clear. She displayed no sorrow, only icy determination, which exacerbated the already awful situation. The jury did not take long to deliberate. Given the clear evidence of her deliberate actions, they convicted her of attempted murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, highlighting the gravity of her conduct and the breach of trust in our family. As she was carried away, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. This was my mother, the woman who once looked after me, now damned by her own hatred and actions. Life after the trial was a lengthy process of recovery. The physical wounds began to heal, but the emotional scars were deeper. Alex was great throughout it all, his constant support and love providing me the strength I required. He balanced his work and caring for the children, ensuring that they understood what had happened in a way that preserved their innocence. Julia was similarly amazing. Despite her own troubled connection with our mother, she supported me and offered comfort and understanding. She had really changed, and our friendship was stronger than ever. We relied on one another, finding solace in our common experiences and hope for a brighter future. During my recovery, Alex and I had many long chats about our lives and our goals for the future. We choose to focus on providing a stable, loving atmosphere for our children, making them feel safe and valued. Our house became a haven for laughter, love, and the warmth of family. The community's support was overwhelming. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers sent warm words and gestures. It reminded me of people's goodness and helped me restore my trust in humanity. I received numerous comments from people who had followed our tale, expressing their encouragement and sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity. 3 weeks after the incident, I felt strong enough to compose this post. It's a chance for me to express my gratitude to everyone who has helped me along the path, who has offered encouraging words when I needed them the most. Your support has meant everything to me. Most of all, I'd like to thank my husband, Alex, and my sister Julia. Alex, you've been my rock, my strength, and my greatest love. Your constant support and love have helped me get through the toughest moments. Julia, you've taught me what true forgiveness and redemption look like. Our bond has never been stronger, and I am grateful every day for the sister you have become. Life is unexpected, and the future is constantly unknown. But with the love and support of those that matter most, I'm confident I can tackle whatever comes my way. Thank you for taking part in my adventure. As I look ahead, I am filled with hope. My mother's acts, however painful, did not break me. They have helped me become stronger and more resilient. I am resolved to live a life filled with love, kindness, and compassion, and to instill in my children the value of forgiveness and family. My father secretly took out $73,000 in loans under my name, ruined my credit, and left me with the debt. Now I must decide whether to file charges. Original post. I, 21, graduated from university with my undergrad in 2024. At the time of graduating I thought that I had around $10,000 of federal student loans. Recently my mom left my emotionally abusive father, leaving just her, me and my sibling by ourselves. I was happy at this decision until I found out that the $10,000 of debt I thought I was in was actually far more than that. I knew that throughout my first year of university he had taken out some private student loans for me. I was told, by my father, that since I was only 18 at the time the bank we loaned from wouldn't allow me to pull out loans since I didn't have good credit. He told me that he would be able to take out these student loans under my mother's name and that he'd pay them off as soon as I'm done with school. I found out recently that the loans were in fact under my name with my mom just as a cosigner. Also that the loans were far more than was needed to pay for my tuition. She did not know this either. BTW. He had taken out a total of $48,000 in private student loans under my name. I remember signing for these. He did not forge my signature. When I asked exactly what I was signing for or more details about everything, he told me, "Stop asking questions and just trust me." Every time I tried to push for answers, I got that response. I trusted him. I trusted that he would not screw me over. I had trusted him to help build my credit when I turned 18. I found out now that he's completely messed up my credit too. My TransUnion score is 669 and my Equifax score is 577. He used my tuition money for rent and bills. I do not know what he used the money he got from my credit cards for. Throughout the past few years, he had convinced us that he was making a lot of money from his job. I now realize that he was likely lying about that and just secretly screwing me over, and my mom too, since he's also messed up her credit. I have 3 closed credit cards that are in debt, I think. One is $6,055 balance, $2,250 credit limit, with $6,055 due. The second is $12,864 reported balance, $1,000 credit limit, with $0 due. Does this second one mean that I don't have to pay off the balance? The third one is $6,228 balance, $6,000 credit limit, with $714 due. From what I have looked up, it seems like I owe a little over $35,000 in credit card debt. I also know that he's messed up my siblings' credit too. I'm not sure by how much. I haven't had the chance to look into that. Also, I think it's important to note that he currently owes 3 different family members over $200,000. I found this out this week too. Flash forward to now, I found out about these loans a few days ago. I now have a total of $58,000 in student loan debt in addition to my credit debt. My first student loan payment is due in less than 3 weeks. I need advice. I don't want to take legal action against him. I don't want him to end up in jail. He is currently helping us by paying for our rent and car even though my mom has left him. My mom doesn't currently have a job, though she is looking, and my job doesn't make nearly enough to provide for ourselves without his help. In August, I will start a higher paying job, and possibly pick up a second job to pay off my debt. So I could ask him to just send me money every month instead of paying for rent and the car. I could use that money to help pay off the debt. As of right now, I am not worried about my federal student loans. The minimum payment is doable and I will receive around $14,000 of tuition reimbursement in March-April, so that will help. Should I consolidate the private loans? Should I refinance? I've briefly considered filing for bankruptcy, since I have no assets, but I know that's probably a bad idea. Is there a way for me to not have to deal with this debt without landing him in a lot of trouble? Relevant comments. Did OOP know what they signed? OOP. It was an electronic signature for the loan where you use the mouse to draw out your signature. He called me over to sign it on his laptop. At the time I still thought that the money would be under my mother's name. I also did not know how much money it would be. Commenter 1. I don't want to take legal action against him. Okay, then you're going to have to pay the loans or declare bankruptcy. Commenter 2. I don't want to take legal action against him. I don't want him to end up in jail. You need to get past this, because he doesn't care what he does to you, and he isn't only hurting you, he is hurting and taking advantage of a lot of people, and is actively ruining your futures to benefit himself. He is currently helping us by paying for our rent and car even though my mom has left him. He isn't helping you, he is providing just enough to hope you don't take action against him. And the money is money he owes you, not that he is using to support you out of care for you and your family. He is not helping. He is using money he took from you and others to pay for that. You are paying for that help in the form of increasing debt, not him. And if he doesn't face serious repercussions for his actions, he is going to keep doing it and you will never get out of the increasing debt he'll continue to saddle you and everyone else with. At the very least, you need to make sure you and your siblings' credit is locked down now to prevent him from taking out new cards and loans under your names. But you really need to just report him to the police so you can remove that debt. Why are you so worried about ruining his life, when he isn't worried about ruining the lives of you, your siblings and everyone else he has taken advantage of? If anyone ruins his life, it will be him by his own actions. Update. Editor's note. Remove the top part of the post as it is a rehash of the original post. Update. After reading all these responses and talking with some close friends of mine, I see that the best thing to do is file against him. I brought up the topic to my mother last night and she, being very religious, said, "No, don't do that. God wouldn't want you to harm another person like this, let alone your own father." She said that she'd rather take on the private student loan debt by refinancing and transferring it to her, but honestly that wouldn't remove the credit card debt and it'd leave her with the debt instead. I don't think that's a good choice. I think that if I file against my dad, my mother will kick me out, so if I file, I will already be prepared to move out. That being said, I currently only have $2,000 saved up from work, and that will not be enough to move out on my own. I'd need more money to get a car, place, and overall survive. I just moved to the city I am in less than a year ago, so I don't have many people to rely on here. My boyfriend offered to let me live at his family's house, but I'd still need to be able to travel to and from work, and I don't want to overstay my welcome. I also don't have the option to move because I have to work in the state of Florida to qualify for my university's tuition reimbursement. In March, I have over $14,000 of tuition reimbursement coming in. My best bet would be to wait till March and then leave. It breaks my heart to do this because I could be disowned by every person in my family, but I can't let myself live with this debt. Prior to this, I thought I only had $10,000 worth of debt, and with that I could have easily lived a good life and paid it off quickly. I'm still not 100% set on this decision, but I do realize that it is the logical thing to do. I want to speak with my sibling to see how much debt my father put them in and to see if they'd want to file too. I also want to speak with a lawyer or someone more knowledgeable than me about this. Does anyone have any advice based on this update? Update number 2 in response to the comments I've gotten. My mom's religious comments are obviously ridiculous, but I'm mostly looking for help with how to file or what to expect. I have records showing $23,000 of refunds went to a bank account he controlled. I didn't see a dime of that money, and I think he used it to pay for a vacation NGL. Relevant comments. Is it possible for OOP to find a new place or rent near their job? OOP. I'm a substitute teacher. I work at different schools around the county, so it wouldn't be possible for me to get a job near work, unfortunately. How did OOP's father get involved in OOP signing the documents with their mother? OOP. All I did was sign. He filled out everything. Now, I understand looking back that I was stupid for signing without asking. But, after some further looking into things, I see that the amount of money I was refunded by my school was an insane amount and not an amount I could have spent by myself in one semester, aka $12,000 extra refunded in a semester where my tuition was only $2,000. He must have used that money himself on non-education related things. Also, the credit cards I did not sign for. I didn't even know that you signed for credit cards. He did that all himself. Commenter 1. It sounds to me like both your mom and your dad are in this together. And that if you don't file against them, they will come out ahead, and you will come out behind. Commenter 2. God didn't want your mom to leave your dad either, but she did. So, she doesn't have a leg to stand on when is preaching to you. Report him to anyone you can. Also, if you were under 18 years old, you can't be held responsible for any contracts. Am I the asshole for refusing to help my father and stepmother and telling them they deserve the karma hitting them hard right now? So, when I was around 16, my father, 44 million, began seeing my stepmother Julia, 30 million, and they married 2 years later. Just to clarify, this woman never liked me. She's the reason I was kicked out of my house at 19. Since then, I haven't spoken with either my father or her, until a few days ago, when my father arrived at my place to talk. I'll get to that later, but first, I need to explain what went wrong so you can see who Julia truly is. My mother died when I was just 9 years old. My father had been in other relationships since then, but he was completely committed to Julia from the start. She moved in with us within a few months. Even though she was only a few years older than me, she required me to address her as mom. At the time, I was 16 and she was 24. We were just 8 years apart in age. I never called her mom, or saw her as maternal, since I thought it was inappropriate. Even if she had been older, I doubt I would have addressed her as mom, because my biological mother had died only 6 years earlier. I wasn't prepared to start calling someone else mom, and replacing her so quickly. Furthermore, when Julia made her request, she had only been with my father for 8 months. They might take their relationship at their own pace, but that didn't mean I had to accept her into my life at the same rate, especially since she hadn't tried to get along with me. I calmly informed her that I would not feel comfortable referring to her as my mother because I did not feel linked to her or saw her as a maternal figure. I don't believe I was impolite, but she began to pick on me for no apparent reason after that. She would either be extremely hostile or completely ignore me. It was strange, and it was evident that I refused to address her as mom. I never understood why it was important to her. As far as I was concerned, my father adored her and had totally accepted her as his companion. That should have been enough, but she was fixated on being my mother. She even behaved like she was, albeit not in a good or compassionate manner. She would order me around and pretend to have authority over me. It was as if she wanted to establish herself as a capable mother figure. This behavior bothered me. I'd remind her that she wasn't my mother and didn't need to be so involved in my life since I wasn't ready to give her the responsibility. She'd complain to my father, we'd argue, and things would become uncomfortable. But, in the end, my father and I loved each other enough to reconcile despite Julia. This was how we spent nearly 4 years. After they married, I assumed Julia would start acting normally because she no longer had any reason to be insecure. However, their marriage made her even more determined to become my mother. A few months after their wedding, she sat me down for the same conversation. This time, she said she would love it if I called her mom, since now that she and my father are married, it will help complete our family. She required that I acknowledge her as my mother before anything could happen. By then, I'd seen her true colors. I couldn't believe she had the arrogance to demand that I call her mom, after mistreating me for the previous 4 years. I wasn't especially pleased with their marriage because I knew she didn't like me, and to be honest, I didn't care for her either. I've never been one to mince things, and at 18, I made that abundantly plain to her. After the way she had treated me over the previous 4 years, I had no desire to accept her as my mother or assist her in realizing her dream of a perfect family. I advised her to concentrate on being married to my father and stop worrying about becoming my mother because it was pitiful. I informed her that I already had a mother, whom I adored, and that just because she died in an accident didn't mean the post was open. In very straightforward and respectful terms, I told her that I was not going to replace my mother and that she should stop trying. I also added that her fixation with being my mother was strange, scary, and completely unappreciated, especially given how brutally she had treated me simply because I refused to call her mom. I'm not proud of it because it wasn't very nice, but I did hint that her obsession was psychologically abnormal. That remark evidently irritated her, since she stopped speaking to me entirely following that chat. It was as if I didn't exist for her. At the time, I didn't think it was an issue. In fact, I was relieved when she eventually decided to stop bothering me. About a year later, I understood she had used that time to turn my father against me. It happened so gradually that I didn't realize my father was distancing himself until it was too late. When I realized, I attempted to fix things. I tried multiple times to bond with him, hanging out, talking, and reconnecting, but he was either too busy or constantly with Julia. I recognized that his priorities had evolved after his second marriage, and I attempted to give them space. But it backfired because Julia took up all of his available space in life. Things only got worse after I moved away to college. Whatever little communication I had with my father was vanishing as well. It felt dreadful, and I knew I needed to do something about it. One weekend, I planned to surprise my father by going home. I anticipated him to be pleased, but he appeared annoyed. He informed me he had planned to go out to dinner with Julia, but now that I was home, he couldn't do so. I found this quite offensive and challenged him about his actions. I told him he was acting aloof and strange, and it pained me that he wasn't even pleased with my surprise visit. I conveyed that it felt like he no longer cared about me. In despair, I lashed out at Julia, accusing her of turning him against me. This evolved into a full-fledged argument. My father told me that he knew I had something against Julia since the beginning. He said Julia wasn't attempting to turn him against me, but rather I was trying to turn him against her. He accused me of trying to brainwash him into thinking Julia was the bad guy, despite the fact that she had done everything she could to win me over. According to him, I was the one who turned down her attempts to bond because I did not want to betray my mother. He even suggested my mother would be upset with my behavior. My father informed me that making up tales about Julia to build a wedge between them would not succeed. Over time, I saw that Julia was gradually changing the narrative, telling my father that I had been ignoring and mistreating her from the beginning. Whenever my father was around, she was nothing but lovely, leading him to believe she was incapable of being mean to anyone. He gradually came to believe her account of events. He assumed I was causing issues because I couldn't accept Julia as his wife or come to terms with his departure. This was far from the truth, but my explanation fell on deaf ears. He accused me of attempting to sabotage their relationship and lying about Julia. Then he issued an ultimatum. Either I start respecting Julia, call her mom, and accept their relationship, or I leave. When my father said this, I didn't bother to argue. I hadn't unpacked anything yet, so I grabbed my bags and marched out, never looking back. After that, I went directly to my uncle's place. He was the closest relative I had. He's my mother's older brother and has always had a warm spot for me. I knew that no matter what challenges I had, he would assist me. At the time, I hadn't told my uncle much about Julia. I already knew he didn't like her or support my father's connection with her. Part of this was due to his loyalty to my mother, and part of it was because he thought the age difference between my father and Julia was too great. I didn't want him to detest my father any more than he already did, so I kept quiet. However, after I was kicked out, I told everything to him. He was infuriated. He told me that I had done the right thing by refusing to call her mom, and that Julia was a complete nutcase. He also called my father an absolute moron for believing all of her falsehoods. Once he realized the truth, he told me that he would take care of everything. He offered to cover all of my expenditures, including college tuition, which had previously been my father's burden. He also said that if I ever needed a place to stay, I could always come to him. Even after I graduated, he promised to help me out. True to his word, he supported me every step of the way and has become more of a father to me over the last 6 years than my biological father ever was. As I previously stated, I have not had touch with my father or Julia in 6 years. No one else in the family has. After I told my uncle everything, he was so enraged that he told everyone. I didn't ask him to do anything, but he was too angry to worry about the implications. He notified both my mother's and father's side of the family about the incident. According to what I've heard, no one has contacted my father or Julia since I was kicked out, as they were all against what had transpired. According to my uncle, several individuals attempted to persuade my father to listen, but he refused. He accused me of lying and said they should not trust me. Fortunately, my family knows I am not the person my father and Julia portrayed me to be. As a result, my father and Julia have been forced into extreme isolation. However, I doubt they care because they have not contacted anyone in the last 6 years. On the other hand, I'm doing well for myself. Following graduation from college, I began interning at my uncle's real estate firm. I eventually obtained my real estate license and relocated earlier this year from my former apartment to a much larger one in a more desirable location. I am no longer concerned about my finances. I've even started paying my uncle back, despite his insistence that he doesn't want anything from me. My financial situation is crucial because I believe it is what prompted my father to contact me again. Karma seemed to have caught up with him and Julia. A few months after giving birth, Julia was engaged in a horrific accident. She is currently bedridden and unable to move. My dad paid me a visit a few days ago. During our talk, I discovered that he had quit his job a few years before to start his own firm. Unfortunately, things haven't been going well because the epidemic struck shortly after he started. He has been experiencing financial difficulties. Furthermore, Julia refused to work, leaving him with sole responsibility for financial management. This circumstance is not surprising to me. Julia quit her work shortly after they got married, which he chose to disregard. Things got even more difficult financially when she found she was pregnant and decided to keep the kid. She gave birth approximately 6 months ago. Then, last month, she was involved in a horrific accident while driving herself home from lunch with her friends. She totaled the automobile due to icy roads and a little too much champagne. Fortunately, she was not charged, but it doesn't matter because she severely hurt herself and is now bedridden, unable to move as she heals. My father is in a bad situation because their medical insurance does not cover hiring a nurse. He needs to pay for one out of pocket because he can't stay at home to care for Julia and must work to prevent bankruptcy. Meanwhile, they've been leaving their kid with Julia's parents, but her parents just informed my father that they couldn't watch the child every day because they needed to live their own life. This resulted in a dispute between my father and Julia's parents, with him accusing them of being greedy. As a result, they refused to look after the baby anymore. My father, now out of alternatives, admitted he had no one else to turn to and chose to contact me for assistance. When he paid me a visit, he recounted everything in the hopes that I would intervene. Without hesitation, I declined. I'm not good around newborns, and I definitely didn't want anything to do with Julia's child. Given how much agony the two of them had given me in the past, I refused to allow myself to be used to solving their problems. I told my dad that, while it was good to see him, I was no longer here to serve his purpose. He became enraged, claiming he had gone to considerable lengths to obtain my contact information. From his statements, I deduced that he must have pestered some relatives until they informed him where I lived. I didn't think this was a great attempt, and his entitlement simply made me angry. I reminded him that when I needed him the most, when I begged him to believe me, he had refused. He chose Julia over me, and now I'm choosing myself over him. Despite my repeated requests, he refused to leave. I finally lost my patience. I warned him that if he didn't leave, I would contact the cops, which would end horribly for him. In a heated exchange, I informed him I had no sympathy for him and was not interested in assisting or forgiving him. I said he and Julia deserved all they were going through. After all, Julia had continually lied about me, portraying me as the monster. My father had decided to trust her falsehoods and prioritize her ludicrous requests, even to the point of kicking me out. Instead of believing his own daughter, he favored his wife and her unreasonable expectations. When I said that, he looked shocked and swiftly departed without saying anything. I now feel guilty about what they are going through. I know it's bad, and I'm not sure if I should have stated they deserved it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm not the judge. Still, the guilt weighs on me. Edit. I called my uncle to tell him of my father's visit. He spoke with a few relatives and confirmed that my father had reportedly been contacting everyone after many years, searching for my location. Most people had not responded, but one family on my father's side, who isn't very close to me, felt sorry for him and provided him my contact information and address. So, I was correct. My father did not go to the great lengths that he stated. He was only attempting to make me feel bad. Update 1. I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my post. It was a lengthy post, and I have not discussed it in depth with anyone other than my uncle. It was good to finally get everything off my chest, particularly regarding Julia. Her actions deeply traumatized me when I was younger. Based on the remarks, I believe I was correct in stating that Julia may have had some mental health issues. Her eagerness for me to embrace her as my mother was overwhelming. That being said, I can only infer it. I cannot diagnose her. However, I believe she would benefit greatly from seeing a psychiatrist to determine what was driving her conduct. It seems ridiculous for her to act the way she did simply because I refused to call her or accept her as my mother. Throughout my father's relationship with Julia, I tried to make explanations for his behavior. I knew he loved her, so I tried not to make a scene. But it didn't seem to matter. He didn't care. When it came down to it, he chose Julia above me, his biological daughter. So he had the guts to come up at my house after 6 years of no communication, asking me to assist him out. Even now, I know he was not sincerely sorry. He just apologized because he wanted my aid, not because he truly meant it. In reaction, I have taken precautions to protect myself. I've upgraded security measures around my house in case he shows up again. If he does and refuses to leave when I ask, I will contact the cops right away. Ideally, I'd prefer that he not show up at all, but I realize that's wishful thinking. He's going to come back and attempt to get me to help him again. He already has my contact details. He had been contacting me for the past few days, but I blocked him after a few hours. It's been nearly 5 days since his visit, and I presume he's been taking his time. However, I have a feeling he'll come up again. Just so you know, I'm not afraid of what he may do, it's just that I'm already emotionally spent, and I don't want a long argument with him. That is why I am taking every precaution to avoid protracted chats and have him depart as soon as possible. I'm hoping that when I see him again, it won't be too emotionally draining. Update 2. 2 days ago, I posted here that I was confident my father would return. Actually, he did. He waited a week since our last meeting and came up today. When I spotted him standing outside and ringing the doorbell, I told him over the intercom that I didn't want to speak to him. I had just gotten home from work, so I was exhausted and not in the mood to deal with him. When he refused to go, I grabbed my phone, contacted the cops, and reported him for trespassing. He couldn't hear me from inside and had no idea I'd contacted the police. Until they arrived, he waited outside my door, beating on it and complaining that I was being too hard on him. He stated Julia admitted to making everything up and that they were both deeply remorseful for everything. He explained that all they could do now was apologize and hope for the best, as they couldn't go back in time to fix things. He insisted I give them some leniency, especially given what they're going through. I couldn't believe that even after discovering Julia had lied to him, prompting him to kick me out, he became defensive rather than admitting his sins. He was taking the entire issue so nonchalantly, which was annoying. However, I maintained my composure and did not speak to him. Thankfully, the cops arrived shortly, because his "what can we do about it now" attitude was really getting on my nerves. It was especially distressing because he had wrecked his relationship with his own daughter due to Julia's lies and still couldn't hold her accountable. When the cops arrived, he lost control and began yelling at me, claiming I had lost my mind and had no right to call the cops on my own father. I didn't care. I described the entire thing to the cops. I doubt he will face any charges, but I hope this teaches him a lesson. He did not physically resist being dragged away, but he did stare at me the entire time. I could see he was mortified, but I didn't mind. I was so pleased that he was being removed and that I would no longer have to deal with him. It may sound callous, but after today, seeing how little he appeared to care that Julia lied and ruined our relationship, I feel validated. What I mentioned was completely accurate. He and Julia deserved each other, and more importantly, they earned everything that was happening to them. Perhaps the small one didn't deserve it though. The only person I feel sorry for in this circumstance is my half-brother. There's not much I can do about it but hope for the best. I sincerely hope for the best for him, at least since I have nothing against him. He's merely a youngster who has no idea what his parents are like. I'm praying that he doesn't get caught up in all of this commotion and has to suffer as a result. If he does, he will be the second child Julia and my father have failed, after me. Update 3. After the officers took him away, my father did not contact me for over 3 weeks. Then, a few days ago, I got an SMS accusing me of being awful. The message stated that I was a terrible person and that they regretted reaching out to me in the first place. It stated they were ridiculous to expect me to understand their situation because I've always been a selfish brat who didn't care about anyone else. According to the book, selfishness, not Julia, damaged my connection with my father. The message came from a number I didn't recognize, so I assumed it was my father or Julia. It doesn't matter. That was the last I heard from them, and they haven't contacted me again since. Interestingly, I heard about my father and Julia again today. My uncle called to tell me that a few cousins on my father's side had notified him of their current position. Apparently, my father and Julia are now living separately because he has been requested to leave his home. Julia's parents have moved in to care for her and the baby. According to my uncle, my father considered leaving the infant in foster care until they could get back on their feet. Julia became outraged and threatened to divorce him. Although he was able to calm her down, she was still so enraged that she had him kicked out of the house while she healed. I find it amusing that after kicking me out, he is now experiencing the same situation. One thing is certain, Julia has a mental health problem. Normal people do not behave in such extremes. That being said, I don't have to worry about it because she's no longer in my life. I just think it's funny that my father is going through this, and I felt compelled to share. This is really his karma. My toxic best friend overstepped by claiming maid of honor, disrupted wedding plans, and planned her wedding on my date to create chaos. Original post. Some background info about this girl. Let's call her Jess. At this point in her life, she's kind of a hot mess. She's one of those people who airs everything on Facebook, who has a new love of my life every month, and a new best friend every few months. Her relationships and friendships usually end terribly, with both sides hating each other. How did I become her best friend? Well, she hasn't always been this way. She was relatively normal 5 years ago when I met her, save for the normal, early 20s drama. But in the last 2 years, she's lost her mom to cancer and her grandpa to old age, and she doesn't have any other family. She dropped out of school and found out her boyfriend at the time was cheating on her. After the breakup, I was acting like a shoulder to cry on since she had pretty much hit rock bottom. A few months later, she was telling everyone how close we were and started tagging me as her best friend. A few months ago, I got engaged. Unbeknownst to me, she started telling everyone she was my maid of honor, even though I've always planned on making my sister my maid of honor. But this was right after Jess's mom had died, so I just improvised and said I would have 2 maid of honors. It's still not what I would have liked, but I literally couldn't bring myself to tell this poor girl I don't consider her my best friend. That was my first mistake. About a month after I got engaged, she met a guy. 2 weeks later, she was engaged. A week later, she was married. A month later, she was divorced. Separated? I don't know if it's legal yet. I don't know if anything was legal, but she changed her last name and is still going by that, so I'm guessing it was legal. Ever since the divorce, my own wedding planning has become unbearable. She is constantly telling me how marriage doesn't work, love can't save things, etc., etc., and criticizes how much I'm spending on my wedding when she had hers for a few hundred. Vegas wedding? It's gotten to the point where she's rude to the vendors I'm meeting with, but she gets really upset when I don't take her to meetings since she's the maid of honor. So I'm at the point where I just want to cut her out of the wedding, like I should have done in the first place. However, when I confessed this to a mutual friend, my friend let me know to be careful because Jess can be really vindictive. When she found out her ex from a few years ago was getting married, she tried to contact the bride and tell her he was cheating on her. He wasn't. One of her last besties was fired from her job because Jess made multiple email accounts and regularly contacted customer service complaining about her. And since she knows so much info about my wedding already, I'm really terrified that she'll somehow try to sabotage it. So basically, I don't know what to do at this point. I feel like this wedding is getting away from me, but I also don't know if it'd be less painful to keep her a part of it, because it would save me all the drama. I don't know what she's capable of, so I'm really worried that she'll somehow make everything harder for me if I don't just grin and bear it. Help. Clutter girl I've been comforting through traumatic times turns out to be batshit crazy, and now I think she's going to ruin my wedding if I don't go with the flow. Relevant comments. Comment 1. To add, it might be a good idea to have passwords with your vendors to confirm your identity. OP, thank you for the advice. I was actually considering the password thing, but I don't know if that's taking things too far. I guess I'm kind of worried about vendors resenting me for being high maintenance. But I hear about bridezillas, momzillas, in-lawzillas all the time, so hopefully this isn't the worst they've seen. Comment 2, Jesus just told her Jess. You knew him for 3 weeks before you married him. What in the ever-loving fuck did you think was going to happen? If I've only been seeing a girl for 3 weeks, I won't even poop with her in a half-mile radius. Oops, seriously, the week before the wedding was everyone kindly saying, you sure? You've known him for awfully short time. And she responded, everyone's jealous because they can't be us. Yeah. Comment 3, sounds like you need to have a very uncomfortable talk with this girl. Tell her what you told us here and let her know her negative attitude has no place in planning your wedding. You're sorry things aren't working out for her, but she is not allowed to pile this stuff on you. Tell her that you cannot have her as a maid of honor, and since she seems to think so negatively about marriage you wouldn't expect her to do this. Up to you if you even let her attend the wedding as a guest. Oh my god, I haven't even thought about explaining how her negative attitude towards marriage could be the excuse for not having her in the wedding party. That sounds ridiculously logical, but I've been blinded by a flurry of crazy. Thank you? Update. Guys. This went full-blown crazy. Before I could have a conversation with Jess, she confronted me about it. Apparently the mutual I confided in let the whole story leak and a twisted, more dramatic version made its way back to Jess. Shit, meet a fan. It was an hour or two of me trying to explain to Jess in a somewhat calm manner that I felt she had overstepped her boundaries and it was really taking a mental toll on me while she yelled about what a terrible friend I was and how she's tired of putting all of her faith in the wrong people, and how she was tired of trying her best to be a good maid of honor. I made the mistake of pointing out that I had never asked her to be my maid of honor in the first place, and she responded with, well then I must be delusional. The first step is admitting you have a problem, so. Progress. Needless to say, we aren't on speaking terms. Shortly after that I took all of your advice and called all of my wedding vendors and let them know that my fiancé and I were going to be the only people making any decisions, and set up a confirmation word with them. Apparently this shit happens a lot because nobody even asked why. I accidentally forgot to contact the bakery making our cake, but luckily they called me and asked if I was certain I wanted to cancel the wedding cake. Apparently there was a voicemail left on their machine. Wonder how that happened. Here's where things get really nuts. A few weeks after our blow-up she apparently met some guy who is the love of her life. A few weeks after that they're engaged. I can't make this shit up. She did it again. Then our mutual friends get invitations for her wedding, which is the same date as mine. But since they had RSVP'd for my wedding, a lot of them couldn't make it. A few days before her wedding, they have to cancel because he's already married. And you know what? So is she. I guess she never got officially divorced from that first quickie wedding. So as far as I know no wedding actually happened. I have no idea if they still plan to, I'm just glad to be away from that circus. But anyways, I got married a few weeks ago, everything was wonderful, the weather was great, and everyone present was a joy to be around. Except maybe my uncle who gets a little too dancy when he's drunk, but you know. Family. Thank you to everyone who responded, and to everyone letting me know I'm not helping matters by going with the flow. I will be actively practicing caution when making friends, by running from crazy and not comforting it. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Anyone else think mutual friends are kind of shitty? She was the one who told OP to be careful about Jess, yet she decided it would be a good idea to blab about what OP told her, knowing full well it would get back to Jess? Now instead of telling Jess on her own terms, OP got ambushed instead. OP. I actually asked her about it a few days after the blow-up. Her defense was that she didn't actually tell Jess, she told another mutual friend of ours, who told someone else, who told someone else, who told Jess, so technically it wasn't her fault. Which is how by the time it got to Jess the story was somewhere along the lines of, OMG, Bubble Sex 1 is telling everyone you're ruining her life and sabotaging the wedding. All of us met at work, we all worked at the same restaurant long ago, and it was always a drama-filled place. A lot of the same people still work there and still thrive off of the drama. I'm thinking it's time for me to move on from that specific crowd. Cliques are fun in middle school. In your 20s, not so much. Comment 2. I will be actively practicing caution when making friends. By running from crazy and not comforting it. I'd like to nominate the first candidate for your new policy. The mutual friend, who somehow let the story leak, and repeated to Jess a twisted, more dramatic version of what you had confided in her. Ope. I've decided to distance myself from that crowd. We're at different points in our lives, and I just don't find gossiping all that fun. My real besties, from high school who were all bridesmaids, have all grown up and we would never pull this crap. Comment 3. I bet Jess was never actually getting married this time. It was just a plot to ensure at least some of your friends didn't make your wedding. Oop. I suspect that as well, but since she's done it before, I wouldn't be surprised if she actually went through with it. I'm assuming they were both trying to get divorced before the wedding and realized they wouldn't be able to in time, because some stuff takes time and can't be erased in a jiffy, so they couldn't do it. I get the feeling this guy is either really stupid or just as crazy as she is, so at least they've found each other?